Warrior Lore. Chapter 4177. Yu. Devil Emperor Chi cried out in disbelief. He looked down at his devil body that was rapidly collapsing. Tens of thousands of vortexes were forming inside his devil body, and where his devil core was, wisps of devil flames were gushing out like black blood. A famous expert of the devil realm had fallen in a foreign land just like that. The most terrifying thing was obviously not this. Just as Devil Emperor Chi's devil soul left his body, a strange whirlwind appeared in the air and sucked his devil soul into a bloody place. Devil Emperor Chi didn't even have a chance to resist. Devil Emperor Chi was killed by Xiao Hua, and Emolienchi's figure appeared not far away. Green-robed Xiao Hua also appeared in the air like a god. What's going on? Why didn't you continue with the spell? Green-robed Xiao Hua looked at the copper coin in the air and asked Emolienchi in confusion. Emolienchi's face blushed, and she said in a low voice, "This humble one heard Yun Che sing that ballad in his early years. After so many years, this humble one doesn't remember it too clearly. Hee." Green-robed Xiao Hua laughed mischievously. He raised his hand and grabbed the broken copper coin in his hand. He said with a smile, "If you finish singing, then this copper coin would also be finished. It's fine now. Let this poor Taoist take this thing to buy buns." Taoist? Emolienchi was shocked. She hurriedly reached out and said, "This is something that Yun Che wore when he was young. Can Taoist give this thing to this humble one as a memento?" "You want Yun Che's things? Easy. You can pick one yourself." Green-robed Xiao Hua smiled and said as he took out a spatial ring from his chest and handed it to Emolienchi. When Emolienchi saw this, she almost fell from the air. Wasn't this spatial ring Yun Che wore on his finger? She didn't know when green-robed Xiao Hua took it. Taking a deep breath, Emolienchi begged, "Taoist, this spatial ring is a symbol of the Shundao sect master. This humble one thinks it's better to leave it to the Shundao sect." "Oh, that's true." Green-robed Xiao Hua rubbed his chin, as if he were thinking of something. After a moment, he said, "Then let's return this spatial ring to the Shundao sect." Emolienchi was helpless. She could only bluntly say, "Taoist master, it's not just the spatial ring. The things inside must also be returned to the Shundao sect." "That won't do." The green-robed Xiao Hua immediately shook his head like a rattle drum. "This spatial ring was picked up by I. How can you return it just like that?" Emolienchi was speechless. He thought for a moment and probed, "Spiritual master, the cultivators of the ruins have suffered great losses. In today's battle, many sect leaders have fallen. Among the three major sects, the leaders of the Misty School and the Shundao sect have lost their lives. The two sects are showing signs of decline. If you don't return the Shundao sect's things to the Shundao sect will no longer be one of the three major sections. It will definitely decline. Didn't Taoist Master Xiao say it before? He is a guest elder of the Shundao sect. Do you want him to be a guest elder of a small sect? The Shundao sect is reduced to a second-rate sect because of a spatial ring? How is this possible? However, what you said makes some sense. After all, Xiao Hua is a guest elder of the Shundao sect. I can't go too far." Green-robed Xiao Hua scratched his head, thought for a moment, and handed the spatial ring to Emolienchi and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you to transfer this thing to the Shundao sect." "Okay." Emolienchi took the spatial ring. Just as she said okay, her face changed slightly. Because the spatial ring was very empty, there were no materials. Elixirs and so on were gone. Only jade slips and other things were left in it. Emolienchi opened her mouth, but looking at green-robed Xiao Hua, she knew that no matter what she said, he wouldn't admit it. Emolienchi thought for a moment and had no choice but to put away the spatial ring. Looking at the many primordial spirits in the distance who were still urging their magic power to suppress the multicolored light, she asked in a low voice, "Taoist Master Xiao, is it still not enough?" "Damn it, of course it's not enough." Green-robed Xiao Hua cursed and said, "Who knew that refining the 5 elements wishful heaven staff would be so difficult? This is just the blood refining stage, and so much magic power is spent. How can I refine it in the future?" 5 elements wishful heaven staff. Emolienchi was dumbfounded. Of course, she had heard of the fame of the ancient vicious weapon. She didn't think that the human race of the cultivation world could refine such a divine object. Wasn't this wishful thinking? Unfortunately, how could Emolianchi dare to say half a word at this time? He still had to fill up the things in Yunche's spatial ring, and he also had to think about how to explain this to the Shindao sect elders. He didn't want to cause any more trouble. However, there was no need for him to say anything. Suddenly, a thunderous sound came from the mountain range in the distance. Several demonic pillars rose out of thin air, and the figure of a demon emperor strangely appeared in the middle of the demonic pillars, causing Emolianchi to tremble in fear. Hee. Green-robed Xiaohua smiled, waving the Kunlun mirror in his hand and said, "Sect Master Emo, are you interested in watching a show with me?" Of course. Emolianchi nodded without hesitation. She really wanted to see how magical Xiaohua's illusion array was, and how this illusion array killed the other two demon emperors. "Let's go." Green-robed Xiaohua called out, and the Kunlun mirror in his hand emitted a multicolored brilliance. The brilliance fell in the air and turned into pitch-black demonic energy. As the demonic energy rolled, a huge demonic space appeared. Moreover, within the space, Xiaohua, green-robed Xiaohua, and the others rushed towards the demonic pillars in the middle of the mountain range at lightning speed. Emolianchi's divine sense swept over Xiaohua and the others. It was no different from what he saw before. But when he turned his head to look at the previous location, Xiaohua and the others were still in the middle of the multicolored light. Sigh. Emolianchi shook her head slightly and urged her figure to follow behind green-robed Xiaohua. At this time, she didn't know whether this green-robed Xiaohua was an illusion or not. When Emolianchi flew to the mountain range, she saw that the surrounding tens of thousands of miles of the mountain range had turned into a mess. The mountain range, the boulders, the forest, and everything else had been affected by the battle between the demonic spirit and the bone-tempering Xiaohua. Nothing existed. At the demonic pillars, hundreds of millions of demonic soldiers and generals had appeared. Under the leadership of Demon Emperor Qi, they were desperately fighting against Xiaohua and the other illusions. Xiaohua and the other illusions were like gods that could casually kill countless demonic soldiers. And in the middle of these demonic soldiers and generals, demonic spirit Xiaohua and bone-tempering Xiaohua were struggling to deal with the attacks of the demonic spirit and Demon Emperor Qi in just a moment. Bone-tempering Xiaohua was the first to be defeated, and he escaped from the heavenly white bone. Before bone-tempering Xiaohua could take out the blood bone from the heavenly white bone, Demon Emperor Qi let out a wild laugh. The demonic spirit of the demonic spirit came out of Demon Emperor Qi's demonic body and turned into a demonic pillar that reached the sky. It rushed towards the demonic array space formed by the Kunlun mirror. Demon Emperor Qi even crossed the space and fell into the white bone. When Demon Emperor Qi fell into the white bone immediately flashed with lightning again. The three heads crazily spewed out multicolored light, and the 6 arms pierced towards bone-tempering Xiaohua. Bone-tempering Xiaohua had obviously overdrawn his spiritual power. While he tried his best to block the attack of the arms, he couldn't block the multicolored light. The multicolored light pierced through his head, and he fell to the ground. After that, Devil Emperor Qi even flapped his wings and killed Devil Spirit Xiaohua swiftly like a bolt of lightning before seizing Devil Saber slaughter from him. Ha ha ha. Demon Emperor Qi and Demon Emperor Qi both laughed. One controlled the white bone, the other waved the demonic saber, and they attacked Xiaohua and the other clones. In the illusion, Xiaohua and the others were naturally not the opponents of the 3 great demon emperors. After stubbornly resisting for an hour, they were finally killed by the 3 great demon emperors. Demon Emperor Qi and Demon Emperor Qi still wanted to continue chasing the cultivators of the ruins. However, under Demon Emperor Qi's persuasion, they returned to the demonic array to rest first. After they readied themselves, they would return to the ruins. The 3 demon emperors moved their figures and proudly led the demonic soldiers and generals back to the demonic array formed by the spatial light pillar. Demon Emperor Qi was leading the way. Emolianchi, who was hiding in the illusion array, was ecstatic. Just as Emolianchi was ecstatic, she saw that the demonic spirit of the demonic array, which hadn't completely entered the Kunlun mirror, suddenly shouted, "Not good. This isn't this Emperor's." Moreover, as the demonic spirit of the demonic array roared, waves of fluctuations were generated from the demonic chi pillar that he turned into, destroying the illusion array nearby. When the demonic soldiers and generals disappeared, Demon Emperor Chi's figure also disappeared. Unfortunately, before he could finish his words, the demonic saber murder flashed and cut the demonic pillar in half. Demonic spirit Xiaohua had already stretched out his demonic body from the Kunlun mirror. The demonic chi of the blood-dripping paradise was generated, and like a torrential river, it swallowed the remaining demonic chi of the demonic array's demonic spirit. Ao. The demonic spirit of the demonic array howled crazily, trying to escape from the Kunlun mirror. However, demonic spirit Xiaohua was also a demonic spirit that had lived for God knows how many years. He was very familiar with the demonic array's demonic spirit's weakness. After a few rounds of swallowing, he firmly controlled the demonic spirit and dragged him into the Kunlun mirror. At the same time, a powerful suction force was generated from the Kunlun mirror, firmly enveloping Demon Emperor Chi and Demon Emperor Chi at the same time. Tens of thousands of thunderbolts were generated from Xiaohua's body and landed on the Kunlun mirror. Demon Emperor Chi seemed a little surprised. Seeing the demonic soldiers and generals around him disappear, and Demon Emperor Chi also turned into nothingness, he didn't dare to believe that everything he killed was an illusion. In particular, when the white bones around him also turned into nothingness, he understood that his formless demonic body was hurriedly fleeing for his life. As for Demon Emperor Chi, he already had a warning in his heart. When the demonic saber in his hand disappeared, he didn't stop at all. The wings on his back spread out, and the demonic horn on his forehead produced a space-tearing force. Demon Emperor Chi's figure rushed into the space crack at an extremely fast speed, and before Demon Emperor Chi could say anything, he disappeared from the illusion. "Damn it!" Green-robed Xiaohua angrily cursed. The Kunlun mirror emitted a dazzling light that swept across Demon Emperor Chi's demonic body. With a sizzling sound, more than half of Demon Emperor Chi's demonic body was destroyed. The light beam rushed into the space crack, and a miserable scream came from the distance. -13. Chapter 4178. Just as green-robed Xiaohua used the Kunlun mirror to injure Demon Emperor Chi, Emolianchi clearly saw that there was still a small half of Demon Emperor Chi's body falling into the void. He hurriedly used his spiritual power and spells, but he only managed to kill half of Demon Emperor Chi in the end. He still couldn't stop Demon Emperor Chi. He hurriedly reminded green-robed Xiaohua, "Demon Emperor Chi has escaped." "Humph, he can't escape." The green-robed Xiaohua rubbed his hands, and streaks of crystal light fell into the void. Rumble. The sound of thunder resounded, and sure enough, the miserable shrieks of the Demon Emperor could be faintly heard from the void. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, the screams and the thunder slowly stopped. The corner of green-robed Xiaohua's mouth rose slightly. The light of the Kunlun mirror in his hand faded, revealing a mirror covered with demonic patterns. Of course, these demonic patterns were rapidly decreasing. It seemed that Xiaohua was devouring the demonic array's demonic spirit. Shua. Like tearing silk, Emolianchi's eyes flashed slightly. The whole world was still the same world, but some details seemed to have changed. Looking at the messy ground, bone-tempering Xiaohua's extremely tired figure appeared. On his shoulder was a dream mirage butterfly flapping its wings. Emolianchi's gaze fell on the dream mirage butterfly. Suddenly, an indescribable small world appeared, and scenes of childhood memories covered him like light and shadow. Emolianchi turned pale with fright and hurriedly closed his eyes. However, to Emolianchi's surprise, all the illusions still appeared. Cough, cough. Green-robed Xiaohua coughed. The Kunlun mirror's light pillar reappeared and took back the dream mirage butterfly. Only then did the illusions around Emolianchi slowly disappear. Emolianchi looked around in surprise, and his back suddenly broke out in cold sweat. Facing the dream mirage butterfly, the Tao foundation he had refined for tens of thousands of years was like paper. Rumble. At this moment, thunder and lightning appeared in the distant space. The original forms of the 5 elements that had appeared in the star field earlier had now fallen into the contact of the magnetism. The thunderbolt that descended from the sky not only shattered the previous imprisonment, but also fell into the original forms of the 5 elements. The original forms of the 5 elements actually produced a multicolored light that Xiao Hua could not control, causing the 3 magnetism to shake. Not good. Xiao Hua had already refined the primordial magnet and innate mother with his blood. He understood that this was the most crucial moment. If he couldn't refine the 5 elements into the primordial magnet, then not only would he fail, he and the others would also suffer from the backlash. This backlash wasn't just the backlash from refining tools, it was also the backlash from the celestial phenomenon. Fellow Taoists, Xiao Hua's forehead was drenched in sweat, and he had no choice but to remind them once more. His hands once again surged with seals, and all of his magic power struck the origin magnetism. Seeing the entire space slowly stop shaking and the overflowing multicolored light begin to converge, Xiao Hua's heart gradually calmed down. But at this moment, a voice filled with hatred came from beside Xiao Hua's ear. Taoist Master Xiao, have you thought about the situation when you fall? Who? Xiao Hua turned pale with fright. Right now, he was using all his strength to refine the origin magnetic field. There was simply no way for him to be distracted. If he were to draw out even a trace of his magic power, the origin magnetic field would be ruined and he would suffer a backlash. Now that he heard the malicious voice, how could he not know that he had encountered a huge problem? Sure enough, in the void, a small part of the demon Emperor Qiong's demonic body appeared, but that voice did not belong to the demon Emperor Qiong. Heavenly demon? You actually have a trace of a clone? You don't return to your own sky of freedom, but still want to borrow the demon Emperor Qiong's demonic body. You really are deliberately scheming. Xiao Hua suddenly woke up, and in the distance, the green-robed Xiao Hua was similarly shocked. The Kunlun mirror in his hand had already been activated once more. Whatever this king wants to kill, no matter if it is a human, immortal, or Buddha, this king has never failed. The heavenly demon controlled the demon Emperor Qiong's demonic body and threw it into Xiao Hua's body. Sensing Xiao Hua's abundant essence, the heavenly demon's mouth was filled with an indescribable pride. You are but a mere human cultivator. Even if you have one fortuitous encounter after another, you will absolutely not be able to escape from this king's palm. Sensing that his body was gradually losing control of itself, Xiao Hua's eyes slightly narrowed, and he slightly withdrew the seals in his hands. Boom! A strand of 5 elements multicolored light penetrated the origin magnetic field and landed on Xiao Hua's head. Oh, what are you doing? The heavenly demon greedily absorbed Xiao Hua's essence and quickly took control of Xiao Hua's body. He asked with some surprise, could it be that you think self-destruction can free you? Don't even dream about it. Fellow Taoists, the green-robed Xiao Hua and the bone-honed Xiao Hua both hurriedly came to his rescue, and the Kunlun mirror's light pillar also covered Xiao Hua. Although Emolianchi at the side didn't know what was going on, how could he not know that the situation had changed? However, at this critical moment, a powerful fluctuation appeared on Xiao Hua's head. At the location of the 5 elements multicolored light, a thumb-sized emerald green light spot suddenly appeared. This light spot was extremely bright, and it shone so brightly that Emolianchi hurriedly closed his eyes. A strange thought immediately emerged from the bottom of his heart. Wood origin. Xiao Hua can actually capture the wood origin. Damn it, all the benefits have been taken by him. We cultivators of the ruins can't even get a mouthful of soup. It was exactly as Emolianchi thought. As soon as the emerald green wood origin fell, emerald green flames instantly appeared around Xiao Hua's body, igniting every part of his body. Even the bodies of dragon bloodline Xiao Hua and the bone-honed Xiao Hua's clones also lit up with this emerald green flame. The heavenly demon and the demon emperor howled at the same time in Xiao Hua's body. Damn it, damn it. What is this? The heavenly demon's remnant body and the demon emperor's body had never been tempered by the origin power, so of course they didn't know what the origin power was. However, what they knew was that their devil bodies couldn't withstand the burning of the origin power. At this moment, Xiaohua's body was completely enveloped by the origin power. Even if they wanted to escape, they couldn't. Walking into a trap, lifting a rock and smashing it on their own feet, this was probably the best way to describe their current situation. In just the blink of an eye, the two Devil Realm experts were completely annihilated. As for Xiaohua, he had borrowed the power of the origin source to easily refine the origin magnet. After putting the origin power into the space, Xiaohua's mini-clones all sat cross-legged in the air, guiding the origin power of wood to temper their bodies. Emolianchi looked at Xiaohua with some envy. He knew that even if he obtained the origin power of wood, he would absolutely not dare to use it like this. Although Xiaohua was lucky, he also had the confidence to be lucky. Emolianchi didn't dare to disturb Xiaohua and the others' meditation. He flew into the sky and released his divine sense. At this moment, although two of the three demon emperors surrounding the ruins had been killed, and the remaining one had escaped, the Taoist Devil War wasn't over. The devil race was still fighting fiercely with the human race everywhere. Even in the southwest border, there were still many demon monarchs leading demon soldiers and demon generals fighting against the conference hall's troops. It was just that all the human race and devil race viewed Xiaohua's location as a forbidden area, and no one dared to approach. Sigh. Emolianchi sighed. Looking at the dark clouds covering the demonic array, he knew that the task of the war was still very difficult. However, after sighing, he smiled. Although it was difficult to break this demonic array, as long as Xiaohua was willing, the ruins would be able to see the light of day sooner or later. Woo-woo. Just as Emolianchi sighed, the Kunlun mirror beside the green-robed Xiaohua produced a whistling sound. Light flashed inside, and the devil spirit Xiaohua flew out. At this moment, the devil spirit Xiaohua seemed to be much more spirited. He nodded at the green-robed Xiaohua, and then his figure teleported into the sky. The following scene completely stunned Emolianchi. The devil spirit Xiaohua raised his head, opened his mouth, and spat out a stream of devil chi that crashed into the devil pillar in the demonic array. Then, the devil pillar crazily rolled and quickly returned to the demonic array. The devil race hiding inside the devil pillar were all exposed. Just as these devil race were baffled, the devil pillar fell into the demonic array, and then the entire demonic array began to boil. It turned into a torrent of devil chi and devil flame that followed the devil spirit Xiaohua's devil chi into his stomach. The hundreds of millions of devil race were slowly exposed in the star field. With the disappearance of the demonic array, the brilliance of the three suns began to sprinkle over the entire earth. Looking at this crazy scene, Emolianchi couldn't recover for a long time. She thought that Xiaohua would have to spend a lot of energy to break the demonic array, but she didn't expect that the devil spirit Xiaohua who swallowed the demonic array's devil spirit could break the entire demonic array in a snap of his fingers. However, the demonic array disappeared, but the devil race didn't panic too much. All the devil race reorganized their troops and attacked the ruins again. As for the human race in the ruins, seeing the disappearance of the demonic array, each and every one of them saw the hope of survival. Under the command of the conference hall, all the sects no longer held back and sent out their disciples to fight the devil race in the sky, in the forest, or by the river. In the sky, the devil spirit Xiaohua spent a dozen days absorbing the demonic array. When the last wisp of devil chi fell into his stomach, Xiaohua and the others beside him also let out a soft cry and withdrew their Dharma forms. The originally khaki-colored bone-honing Xiaohua stopped the Big Dipper magical fist, and 10% of his body turned emerald green. Good. Xiaohua looked left and right, then bowed and said, "Fellow Taoists, you've worked hard. Fellow Taoists, you've worked hard." The clones all smiled and returned the greeting. Xiaohua's divine sense swept across the ruins and said with a smile, "Now, the human race in the ruins is evenly matched with the devil race, and even has the upper hand. That devil Emperor Qi has also been seriously injured by us and is no longer a threat. We can kill some devil monarchs and lend the ruins a hand. How about it?" "Very good." The clones responded and were about to move. At this time, a layer of strange fluctuation suddenly appeared in the sky. That fluctuation blew over like a storm, and it even gave birth to a bit of fluorescent brilliance in the air. Moreover, where the fluctuation passed, all the heaven-earth origin chi was destroyed, and all the devil chi was also pierced through. Of course, this fluctuation was like the wind. After it swept over, the heaven-earth origin chi also recovered extremely quickly, and the devil chi also recovered to its original state. -13. Chapter 4179. Great Desolate Starstorm? Xiaohua was shocked. Looking at the direction of the fluctuation and the remaining fireflies in the sky, he hurriedly shouted, How did it come so fast? Fellow Taoist. Just as Xiaohua's voice landed, Soul Cultivator Xiaohua immediately exclaimed in ecstasy, The Great Snow Mountain's divine sense mark is clear again. It must be that after this demonic array is destroyed, the Great Desolate Starstorm will also break through the barrier between the two realms. I can sense the Great Snow Mountain. Great. Xiaohua was overjoyed and hurriedly ordered, Fellow Taoists, quickly return to your positions. We will activate the south-diverging north technique right now. How could bone-tempering Xiaohua and the others dare to stay for a moment longer? They all entered Xiaohua's body. Not far away, Emolianchi was very puzzled and hurriedly urged his figure to come over and ask. When Soul Cultivator Xiaohua entered Xiaohua's body, he still exhorted, Fellow Taoist, don't rashly activate your soul technique. Our cultivation is not enough. When crossing the barrier between the two realms, it's best to use the teleportation array. I know. Xiaohua nodded. Seeing Emolianchi flying over, he waved his hand and said, Sect Master Emo, the Great Desolate Starstorm has already arrived. You all should quickly make a plan. The demon race is also afraid of this Great Desolate Starstorm and will definitely withdraw their troops early. I promised your ancestors matter. I will definitely accomplish it. You should also help I a little. I have a disciple. At this point, Xiaohua's heart trembled. He hurriedly shut his mouth and shouted, You don't need to care about I's matter. Quickly inform the discussion hall about the Great Desolate Starstorm. Emolianchi was somewhat puzzled as to why Xiaohua didn't say anything. However, when he heard about the Great Desolate Starstorm, his heart was also in chaos. He cupped his hands and said, All right, I will inform the discussion hall. Taoist, please return to the Soaring Dragon Mountain Range to arrange your disciple. Finished speaking, Emolianchi hurriedly left. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over and teleported towards the teleportation array. Naturally, there was a fierce battle between the human race and the devil race near the transmission array, but Xiaohua's arrival did not attract the attention of the human race or the devil race. Xiaohua's figure paused in the air for a moment, his eyes looking around, looking at the place where the battle once took place. He transmitted a few words to Wu Tian, telling him to prepare to come out and look for an opportunity to leave. He then descended into the ground, closed his eyes and meditated for a moment, then entered the transmission array. After that, Xiaohua used the going south, going north technique to confirm the location marked by the Great Snow Mountain's divine sense and activated the transmission array and soul technique. Seeing a transmission channel appear in the void, Xiaohua stepped into it. The moment his figure disappeared, he did not forget to turn his head to look at ruins. He knew that once he went in, he would not be able to see ruins again in this life, and he would not be able to see Yu Mingxin, who had some feelings for him. What Xiaohua didn't expect was that when his figure entered the transfer channel slowly closed, and the transfer array under the ground slowly stopped operating. Another demon flapped his wings and flew over. Wasn't he the demon General Sakura that Xiaohua had seen in the demon array before? At this time, Sakura was in a rather sorry state. There were many lacerations on his demon wings. Not only were devil flames seeping out of these wounds, but his white demon bones were also exposed. What was special was that some devil chi was uncontrollably emitting from the wounds. He looked like a sparrow with its tail on fire. When Sakura flew close to the teleportation array, the demon horn on his forehead suddenly produced a layer of faint devil halo. Sakura's face immediately became nervous. However, when he scanned the surroundings with his devil sense, he didn't find anything abnormal. His nervousness was replaced by ecstasy. Immediately after, the devil chi around Sakura's body surged. The halo on his demon horn became brighter and brighter. His figure flew towards the teleportation array that Xiao Hua was teleported to. When he landed in the sky above the teleportation array, a wave of energy shot out from his demon horn. It was precisely aimed at the underground space where the teleportation array was about to close. However, this wave of energy was weak when it landed in the void. It couldn't open the restriction of the teleportation array. Sakura turned his head to look. It seemed that there were pursuers behind him. He clenched his teeth and took out a triangular bronze magic weapon from his demon palm. This magic weapon had a faint wave of energy. Moreover, the wave of energy was already disorderly. Obviously, the array inside was already on the verge of collapse. Sakura threw this magic weapon into the wave of energy from his demon horn. That magic weapon was hidden in the void by him using a secret technique from the demon realm. Soon after, he flew another 100 feet forward and fell on the ground. His entire body was twitching slightly on the ground. He looked like he was already exhausted. Quick, senior brothers, that demon general is over there. Sakura had just set up an ambush when a slightly weak divine sense swept over from afar. Then, Yu Mingxin's voice came through while gnashing his teeth. She's already seriously injured and can't hold on any longer. Let's join hands and kill her to avenge senior brother Changming and the others. After Yu Mingxin, who was holding a long whip and wearing a silk handkerchief on her face, appeared, Yang Haoya, who was holding a long sword, also flew out. After seeing Sakura's appearance, he immediately pulled away from Yu Mingxin and flew towards Sakura in a fan shape. He even shouted, "That's right. This guy is too cunning." He actually set up an ambush next to the teleportation array and killed senior brother Changming. If I don't avenge senior brother Changming today, I won't be able to eat or sleep in peace in the future. Be careful. After flying for a while, Wan Wuxin also flew over with a long saber in his hand and warned, "I'm afraid there's an ambush here." Humph. The heaven-earth origin chi here is not only abundant but also chaotic. There's no trace of devil chi. Yang Haoya coldly snorted. If you say there's an ambush by my Dao disciples, I can still believe it. That's right, little sister also doesn't believe it. Yu Mingxin raised her head and looked at the sky. The devil chi there had already dissipated, and the rumbling sound was incessant. She said, "The devil race's devil array has already been destroyed by Senior Xiao and the rest. Sooner or later, the devil race will be driven out of the ruins by our human race. How can they still set up an ambush here?" Wan Wuxin looked at the two men and women who were full of confidence and smiled bitterly in his heart. He opened his mouth and wanted to remind them, but he still stopped. He released his divine sense to search carefully. After confirming that there wasn't an ambush, the three of them were already close to Sakura. Wan Wuxin shouted again, "Senior brother Yang, junior sister Mingxin, we don't need to get too close to this fiend. We can just take out our magic artifacts here and kill him." "That's right." Yu Mingxin nodded with hatred. She circulated the magic power in her body, and that long whip transformed into a huge python that pounced towards Sakura's back. Yang Haoya didn't dare to be negligent. He also raised his long sword, and the sword chi was like a rainbow. It tore through the air and fell towards Sakura's head. Wan Wuxin waved his long sword, and a crimson-red sword shadow came out from his body. It let out a rumbling sound and fell towards Sakura's back like a huge millstone. Just as the three of them took out their magic artifacts, Sakura's body that was lying down didn't change. His head that was facing away from everyone suddenly turned around strangely, and his face revealed a mocking and ridiculing expression. Not good. Wan Wuxin was alarmed. He circulated the magic power in his body and wanted to retreat quickly. Unfortunately, he was still too late. Just below the three of them, that magic artifact that was hidden in the void revealed itself. The fluctuations on the magic artifact were abnormally chaotic. A surge of energy gushed out from the magic artifact and enveloped the surrounding few miles. Although Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoya, and Wan Wuxin were already alerted and each of them circulated their magic power to protect themselves, that magic artifact that Sakura had obtained from an unknown place had an extremely strong explosive power. That violent force closed in and knocked the three of them into the sky. It even tore apart the magic that the three of them had used to defend themselves. Even their corporeal bodies were damaged greatly. and when the magic artifact's force fell on the ground, the entire earth was trembling. On the ground, there were originally withered branches, gravel, and hills. Normally, no one would come here. After the impact force passed, the wilderness was cleared out and an open space was formed. What was special was that under the open space, a layer of mysterious restriction was torn apart. Even more chaotic and frightening chi of heaven and earth surged out from the ground. The heavy rumbling sound was also exposed. Although the naked eye couldn't see through the ground, Sakura's devil sense could see clearly. Wasn't that a transmission array that was about to stop? Joy appeared on Sakura's face. His devil body that was lying on the ground suddenly flapped his wings, and his entire body suddenly rushed into the transmission array. However, with a flash of brilliance in the transmission array, his body was actually about to disappear. Without waiting for Sakura's body to disappear, Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoya, and Wan Wuxin flew to the sky above the transmission array at the same time. The three of them were wearing ragged clothes, and there were bloodstains all over their bodies. It was obvious that they were severely injured. However, when the three of them scanned with their divine senses, they were all shocked. Wan Wuxin cried out, Why is there a transmission array here? This devil general is escaping. Chase! Yu Mingxin shouted without hesitation. Her body swayed, and she executed an escape technique to pounce into the transmission array. Junior sister Mingxin. Yang Haoya hurriedly cried out. This transmission array appeared for no reason. Could it be the devil general's scheme? It can't be. Wan Wuxin had long understood what was going on. This is our Taoist transmission array. Although I don't know why this devil general is able to activate it, and I don't know why he doesn't use vital stones, since it's our ruins transmission array, it must be used by the human race. This demon must have been a blind cat running into a dead mouse to find this place. If he wants to use this transmission array to escape, how can we let him do as he wishes? Wan Wuxin's thoughts were meticulous. Yu Mingxin and Yang Haoya had always believed in him. Although Yang Haoya was still somewhat hesitant, Yu Mingxin was eager for revenge. When she heard Wan Wuxin's agreement, she had already executed her escape technique and rushed into the transmission array. Since Yu Mingxin was moved, Yang Haoya and Wan Wuxin didn't dare to delay and rushed into the transmission array at the same time. At this moment, in that transmission array, Sakura's figure had just disappeared. When the three of them entered, the transmission array let out a final rumble. After sending the three of them into the transmission array, it immediately stopped. However, in just a moment, the brilliance gradually receded and the fluctuations of the heaven and earth vital energy also died down. The great battle in the ruins was still ongoing. Xiaohua and Sakura both teleported away. Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoya, and Wan Wuxin also chased after them. As for what was at the other end of the transmission array, Xiaohua knew in his heart. The other devil general and the three human cultivators didn't know. However, somewhere in the star domain, that nameless existence that was alarmed by the celestial skeleton stopped again. His body flickered with a strange brilliance, and he stuck his head out from the starlight. However, in just a moment, this existence's eyes were filled with astonishment. He tore open the void and rushed in. The direction was actually where Xiaohua's transmission array disappeared. -13. Chapter 4180. As for Xiaohua, he had already held the Grand Cosmos shifting token in his hand. The magic tool flickered with a faint halo that enveloped him. When the heavy spatial energy from the teleportation array landed on this halo, it only caused a slight ripple before disappearing again. At this moment, Xiaohua was activating the teleportation channel while using the going southway north technique. His expression was very cautious, and he appeared to be very careful. After experiencing the error in the previous teleportation, Xiaohua already knew that even if his cultivation was at the level of a god, he could not be careless at any time. There were too many accidents in this world, and every unexpected accident would cause a huge change. And this change would happen most of the time. In other words, nothing could be done according to his wishes. Even if he had already built the teleportation channel and used the going southway north technique to discover the Great Snow Mountain's divine sense mark, he still did not have any confidence that he could teleport to the sky above the Great Snow Mountain. In fact, the current Xiao Hua did not dare to imagine that he could reach the Great Snow Mountain. He only hoped that he could return to the hidden immortal continent, Western Paradise, or any place in the Thousand Demons sacred realm, as long as it was related to the three continents. Xiao Hua even hoped that he could return to the Dawn Rain continent. That would be even more wonderful. However, these were all extravagant hopes. Xiao Hua only hoped that the divine sense mark in the distance would be stable, and not like it was now, like a candle in the wind. Fortunately, the teleportation channel had already been going for several hours. Although the divine sense mark was like a candle in the wind, it was still clear, and there were no signs of it disappearing. This made Xiao Hua rather gratified. However, this teleportation channel was really long. It felt even longer than when he went from the heavenly prison to the ruins. Xiao Hua had never experienced such a long teleportation in his life. When the teleportation channel had already become a habit, Xiao Hua suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. This was because the closer the distance, the clearer the divine sense mark should be. However, in Xiao Hua's soul technique, the divine sense mark of the Great Snow Mountain was always like that, neither far nor near. Even after several hours of teleportation, it was still so far away, like a natural star, forever beautiful but forever untouchable. Just as Xiao Hua's doubts appeared, the entire teleportation channel suddenly began to tremble. The space around Xiao Hua released a trembling sound. Xiao Hua was greatly alarmed. The soul strands on his forehead surged out like a swarm of bees and landed on the transportation channel where the green seal characters were crazily surging. However, before the teleportation passageway could stabilize for a few breaths of time, a strange creaking sound was heard again. It was like a wooden boat being unable to bear the weight of the waves. After that, Xiao Hua watched helplessly as the teleportation passageway seemed to be stretched by a large hand. Even his own body became flat and slender along with the passageway. Ah! Xiao Hua tried to call out. His voice was very soft, but it was also extremely long. When Xiao Hua's figure was distorted by the time, and every part of his body was fluctuating to different degrees, Xiao Hua understood that he was once again in a turbulent flow of time. Of course, Xiao Hua wasn't surprised at all by this situation. Furthermore, he wasn't alarmed but happy instead. The existence of the turbulent flow of time made it clear that he wanted to leave the ruins, leave the star field where the ruins were located. In other words, he wanted to leave the upper realm where the primordial spirit was cultivated and return to the hidden immortal continent, where he was familiar with cultivating the nascent soul. However, when the four walls of the teleportation channel slowly became transparent, the green seal characters, runes, and even the fluctuations of magic power were slowly erased. Xiao Hua himself was distorted to the point where he was almost unrecognizable. Perhaps he was just like a light shadow or a fluctuation. Only then did Xiao Hua start to feel fear. At this moment, his magic power disappeared, his divine sense disappeared, his soul consciousness disappeared, and the soul technique that controlled the teleportation channel disappeared. Even his thoughts were slowly being pulled out. His eyes were pitch black. A deathly stillness that was even quieter than the heavenly prison began to pass through his body and rush into his mind. He couldn't control his own body, and he couldn't control his steps even more. A kind of ignorant terror pervaded Xiao Hua's heart. He was like a mortal walking alone in a pitch-black mountain in the middle of a pitch-black night. Xiao Hua was fearful of the unknown things in front of him. What is that? Just when Xiao Hua was feeling helpless, in the boundless darkness, he saw a hazy brilliance. A ribbon of light appeared in Xiao Hua's vision. This light knot was very strange. It was like a complete ribbon of light that was cut off. Moreover, it twisted at the place where it was cut off and reconnected again. Above this time knot, rays of light that were as bright as swimming fish flickered and surged. These rays of light didn't need to leave one side of the light knot and could easily flow to the other side. Xiao Hua was a little dumbstruck by this sight. Seeing the light knot, Xiao Hua's figure suddenly sped up. His distorted figure was even more like a light shadow being cut apart, turning into pieces. Could it be that I'm still in the teleportation channel? Xiao Hua suddenly came to a realization. But in this space-time turbulence, I can no longer see the teleportation channel? Just when Xiao Hua came to a realization, he suddenly lowered his head again. He pulled his gaze away from the vision in the distance and looked at his own body. At this time, his body was no longer in shape. It had already turned into pieces of light shadows. These light shadows didn't follow any rules. Moreover, as the teleportation channel sped up, these light shadows were cut again, turning into smaller light shadows. This happened a few times. Before the light knot, Xiao Hua's figure was already formed from small particles. Xiao Hua suddenly had a flash of inspiration. He recalled the time when he followed Fairy Hong Xia into the ancestral shrine star in the millions of Ming Mountains. At that time, didn't he turn into a particle? Could it be that, by turning into a particle, I can fly faster? Could it be that in this star field, only the particle form is the best state to fly? Xiao Hua's almost stagnant mind rumbled as he thought of his light escape. Allowing the body to be light is an escape. Light is formless and intangible. How can I allow the body to be light? Since light can shine in this star field, could it be that light is also in the form of particles? Xiao Hua seemed to have touched the door of light escape. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to think about it because his figure was really like a lightning bolt, rushing towards the huge light knot. In just a moment, Xiao Hua had already arrived in front of the light knot. On the contrary, when he got closer, Xiao Hua could no longer see the shape of the light knot. He could only see that the light knot was vast and boundless. On one side of the light knot, there was a tide of light more majestic than the sea surging violently. Every time it moved, there would be endless fluctuations rushing out from the light spot. Xiao Hua was very familiar with these fluctuations. They were the fluctuations of time in the heavenly prison. Although Xiao Hua's ears couldn't hear any sound, the rumbling sound that reached the heavens and earth resounded in his heart. This sound could almost destroy all the sounds in the world. How is this possible? Xiao Hua was dumbstruck as he looked at the miracle between heaven and earth. Even in the incomparably mysterious heavenly prison, all he could see was the brilliance produced by the intersection of several different time domains. This brilliance was already extremely rare and had already benefited him greatly. He had never thought that besides the heavenly prison, in this mysterious space, there would actually be time turbulence that surpassed the heavenly prison's time domain. And what made him especially puzzled was that the mark of the Great Snow Mountain's spiritual sense that he sensed was actually within the chaotic and incomprehensible time turbulence. Moreover, his spiritual sense mark was like a candle in the wind, not far nor near. Damn it, it must be the law of time. Xiao Hua suddenly understood. Only the law of time can surpass the law of space and allow the spiritual sense mark of the Great Snow Mountain to maintain a constant distance. Could it be that the 3 continents are within the light knot? The 3 continents are actually so mysterious? As Xiao Hua pondered, his figure once again rushed into the knot of light. As Xiao Hua's speed increased, strange lights and shadows flashed before his eyes like lightning. Within these lights and shadows, there were endless illusions. There were continents, mountains, rivers, and battles of life and death. All kinds of strange and motley things appeared one after another in the lights and shadows. Boom! When Xiao Hua crashed into the knot of light, countless voices once again rushed into his mind. Of course, these voices were merely like thunder, and after flashing past, they immediately became silent. Moreover, around Xiao Hua's body that had already turned into particles, endless light dots drowned Xiao Hua like a tide of light. It was as if only Xiao Hua existed in this world at this time. Sensing that every particle on his body was emitting a kind of fluctuation, Xiao Hua really wanted to cry but had no tears. He wanted to take this opportunity to comprehend some of the law of time, but the chaotic fluctuations of time made him want to comprehend until he died. Another few moments later, this tide of light produced a small vortex. This vortex gradually condensed into a flow of time as Xiao Hua went deeper, wantonly flowing in the light knot. The 3 continents. Seeing an indistinct continent that seemed to be formed by countless illusions superimposed together in the flow of time, Xiao Hua cried out in alarm, "It must be. Otherwise, how could this Zhao's divine sense mark appear on it?" However, In just a moment, Xiao Hua wanted to cry but had no tears. His thoughts were as slow as a crawling snail. Damn it, with such a chaotic flow of time. Even if this Xiao returned to the Great Snow Mountain, then who knows when in the hidden, immortal continent? Maybe 1,000,000 years ago, maybe 1,000,000 years later. What's the point of this Xiao going back to the hidden, immortal continent like this? Unfortunately, even if Xiao Hua didn't want to go back, his body that had almost turned into a light shadow still quickly crashed into the continent. Just as he approached one of the illusions on the continent, suddenly, his body of 13,200 particles slightly shook, and the transmission array that had disappeared in the flow of time suddenly reappeared. As if it had bumped into something, it suddenly became unstable. Moreover, just as his body was trembling, a vague image of light and shadow appeared amidst the myriad of light and shadow. -13. Chapter 4181. In this light, a tall and thin figure appeared. At this moment, this figure was lying helplessly, as if he had already fainted. On the left side of this figure, there was a black puppy and a yellow marten. What made Xiao Hua especially shocked was that this tall and thin figure's right hand was tightly gripping a sword embryo that he was familiar with. Before Xiao Hua could see clearly, the light and shadow shook again, and an indescribable ripple extended behind this figure. It was similar to the ripples of Xiao Hua's transmission channel. If nothing unexpected happened, Xiao Hua's transmission channel should have collided with the transmission channel that this figure was in, causing an abnormality to occur. The light and shadow shook once, and then the light and shadow disappeared, as if the entire light and shadow had fallen into the forward ripple. The brilliance of the grand cosmos shifting token in Xiao Hua's hand shook again, smoothing out the somewhat collapsed transmission channel. As a result, the light and shadow of the transmission channel that Xiao Hua was in also immediately disappeared into the torrent of time. Xiao Hua was dumbstruck like a wooden chicken. His already slow mind could no longer keep up with what he had just seen. Although it was just a glance and he didn't see anything clearly, he could clearly feel that the figure was so familiar. The little dog and the little marten were also familiar, and there was also that sword embryo. However, he didn't have time to think too much. Another kind of fear arose in his heart. Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua's voice shouted in his physical body, "Not good. The divine sense mark has disappeared." Xiao Hua was shocked. That's right. The divine sense mark that had been faintly discernible before had completely disappeared now. He couldn't sense it at all. It was as if the divine sense mark didn't exist at all. This situation was exactly the same as when Xiao Hua had mistakenly entered the ruins. What should we do? Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua was somewhat at a loss. Xiao Hua's eyes narrowed slightly. Looking at the endless illusory continent in front of him, he made a prompt decision and said, "Forget it. We're in the turbulent flow of time, so we're doomed. We can only survive by entering the 3 continents. Use the going south, going north, going south, going south, going north, going south." All right. Hearing this, the Soul Cultivator Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his Soul Warrior to activate. Thousands of green seal words flew out and disappeared into the flow of time. But as the green seal words disappeared, Xiao Hua's portal continued to move closer to the continent. Mountain ranges and villas could be seen clearly in front of him. Suddenly, an indescribable barrier appeared in front of Xiao Hua, preventing him from entering the portal. What's going on? Xiao Hua was about to cry. How come the 3 continents don't recognize me? This Xiao has only been away for a few days. Calm down, fellow Taoist, Xiao Hua said. We'll try again. Although he was a bit flustered, he forced himself to remain calm. Yes. Clenching his teeth, Xiao Hua's soul tendrils flew out from his forehead and surged into the barrier in an attempt to break through. Unfortunately, he didn't know what this barrier was, but it was incomparably tough. No matter how hard Xiao Hua tried, he couldn't break through it. Xiao Hua could only watch as the continent flashed past his eyes like lightning. Motherfucker. I don't believe this. Xiao Hua slapped his forehead and opened his illusion breaker Dharma eye. A round of silver-white pupils appeared, and before the silver-white beam of light could shoot out, the incomparably tough barrier suddenly disappeared. Xiao Hua's figure flashed in the light and disappeared into the light and shadow of the continent. However, at this moment, the entire world where Xiao Hua was located just happened to turn from one side of the boundless light not to the other, and the light tide that was rushing up started to fall down like a waterfall on the other side. Just a moment later, another shadow appeared within the light tide. The unconscious figures of Sakura, Yu Mingxin, Yang Haoya, and Huan Wuxin appeared again. At this moment, the demonic horn on Sakura's forehead emitted an extremely dim fluctuation. This fluctuation protected the three of them. When the fluctuation dissipated, the three of them also crashed into one of the shadows on the continent. Seeing that he had crashed into a continent's light, Xiao Hua's heart was suddenly in suspense, and at this time, his eyes swayed. The feeling of dizziness that he hadn't felt for a long time actually appeared. The entire continent was spinning in front of his eyes. Xiao Hua was shocked. Because the divine sense mark of the snowy mountain had disappeared, his transfer array didn't have a specific location. If he spun like this, he was afraid that he would fall into the same place as the heavenly prison. At that time, he really wanted to cry but had no tears. Xiao Hua hurriedly urged his soul technique. Fortunately, his soul tendrils were like his trembling heart. While protecting Xiao Hua, they also extended towards the continent. But after a few breaths, the spinning stopped and all the light disappeared. The familiar transfer array appeared in front of Xiao Hua's eyes again. This transfer array was shaking rapidly, as if it was about to collapse. Moreover, in this passage, there were still some faint fragments of time flowing faintly. Good. Seeing the transfer array appear in front of his eyes, Xiao Hua understood that he had already come out from the chaotic flow of time. Right now, he was about to land on the snowy mountain. Unfortunately, it was still too early for Xiao Hua to be happy. Before he could even clap his hands, a loud rumbling sound resounded by Xiao Hua's ears. A teleportation force that could flatten a mountain was similarly transmitted from the teleportation passageway. Not only was the teleportation passageway extremely deflated, even the brilliance of the Grand Universe teleportation token shattered with a pew sound. Not good. Xiao Hua hurriedly slapped his head. Boom! A tricolored brilliance spurted out, transforming into a huge lotus that protected his body. At the same time, thousands of soul tendrils flew out from between his eyebrows and landed on the transfer array. One by one, thumb-sized green seal script appeared in the soul tendrils, trying to stabilize the transfer array. Creak, creak, creak. A series of dull sounds came from the left side of Xiao Hua. It was as if a tattered wooden door was being blown by the wind and shattered. Puff, 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 puff. The transfer array behind Xiao Hua was the same as before, continuously exploding. Xiao Hua looked at the torn space and couldn't help but groan. Damn it, I have become enemies with the transfer array. Every time, it seems like I can't teleport to the place normally. Looks like this time, I don't know who will be trampled under my feet again. Can't we use another method to return to the snowy mountain? Although Xiao Hua was resentful, he began to try his best to maintain the stability of the transfer array. However, the spatial transformation power in this torrent of time was so strong that it was far from what Xiao Hua, a human cultivator, could control. He was like a young boy, using his hand to support a large rock while walking on a rope in the air. On one hand, he had to maintain balance. On the other, he had to use all his strength. Boom! Finally, after persisting for a while, Xiao Hua was unable to maintain the transfer array. The green seal script that came in contact with the transfer array shattered one by one, and the soul tendrils connected to the seal script also broke inch by inch. The entire transfer array collapsed with a rumble. Xiao Hua hurriedly slapped his forehead when he saw countless gray lightning bolts flashing in the air and glass shards slicing through the space around him. A fist-sized silver-white beam of light shot out of his delusion breaker eye and landed among the shards. Gotcha! Within the pillar of light, all the fragments were shattered, and then a vortex of several meters in size was formed. The entire space was torn apart by this vortex. Before Xiao Hua could sweep out with his divine sense, another huge rumble resounded, and a huge pushing force appeared behind him. It was as if the void had kicked him in the butt, and he was forcefully kicked out. This force was so fierce and sudden that Xiaohua only had time to urge his true qi to protect his body. He didn't have time to use the lightning escape technique, and his entire body rushed into the sky. Xiaohua's body abruptly appeared in the sky above the continent. Apart from the ripples in the sky that slowly spread in all directions like water waves, no one knew where he came from, let alone that he had passed through the rare chaotic flow of time between heaven and earth. Perhaps the only thing that could be seen was the tricolored light shining on his body. He was also dragging a tail that looked like thick smoke behind him. He was whistling as he shot toward the mountain peak below at an extremely high speed. Strange whining noises could be heard in the sky as well. Immediately after, with a long pu, Xiaohua's body crashed into a mountain peak like a meteor and disappeared without a trace. This sound was so loud that it scared some of the strange birds nearby, and none of them couldn't help but flap their wings and fly away. The cries of these birds and beasts sounded extremely chaotic under the clear sky. Even though the scorching sun in the sky shone brightly, it still couldn't cover up this mess. At this moment, the nameless continent welcomed an inexplicable, uninvited guest. Boom! In just a short moment, the entire mountain peak was shaking. Xiaohua's body flew out from the mountain rocks, and the light protecting his body flickered, blocking all the dust and gravel to the side. Damn it! Xiaohua flew while shouting cheerfully, "Snowy Mountain, this daddy is back. Somehow, wait for this daddy to flatten your nose." However, when Xiaohua saw the mountain peak in front of him clearly, and then looked at the scene around him, he couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. He saw that this was a mountain peak that was more than 10,000 feet tall, and it was covered with huge mountain rocks. Between the mountain rocks, there were some strange ancient trees. These ancient trees were also huge and different from what Xiaohua usually saw. They were actually somewhat similar to the ancient trees in the Dragon Island's Folded Jade Legacy realm. Moreover, on the left side of the mountain peak, the mountain range was like a horned dragon crouching on the ground. It stretched as far as the eye could see, and the entire earth was dyed green and yellow by these mountain ranges, brimming with a kind of vicissitudes and desolation. This is the Snowy Mountain? Xiaohua's eyes were filled with doubt, and he muttered to himself, could it be that this Zhao's previous guess became a reality? Although this Xiao returned to the Western Paradise, but it wasn't the time when this Xiao left, but a long time ago or a long time later. -13. Chapter 4182. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's heart moved, and he hurriedly looked at the sky. It was noon, and a white sun was hanging there. It was not the three suns of the ruins. Fortunately, seeing this scene, Xiaohua sighed in relief and thought to himself, no matter what, I've returned to the three continents. I've left the ruins and escaped from the great desolate star storm. Who cares what time it is in the three continents? As he thought about this, Xiaohua released his divine perception to explore the surroundings again. However, as he looked around, he frowned again. This was because the surroundings of this mountain were completely different from the Great Snow Mountain in his impression. Even the mountain itself was different from the Great Snow Mountain. Even within 10,000 li, there was no mountain similar to the Great Snow Mountain. Perhaps the world has changed, and the Great Snow Mountain of the past is too far away, and the Great Snow Mountain has not formed yet? Xiaohua comforted himself. Then, Xiaohua urged his body, preparing to teleport to the left to continue exploring. However, just as his body swayed, he stopped again. He looked at the surroundings in disbelief, but he saw that the heaven and earth origin qi was extremely rich, more abundant than any heavenly abode that Xiaohua had seen before. The heaven and earth origin qi in many places was about to condense into droplets. It can't be. Xiaohua's heart thumped, and he had a bad feeling. Although the Pure Land is the Buddhist sect's territory, and my Tao sect's cultivators rarely cultivate there, but it's impossible to have such rich heaven and earth origin qi in the vicinity of the Great Snow Mountain. Even thinking of this, Xiaohua immediately slapped the top of his head, and his innate true qi turned into 5 qi's unifications and rushed into the air. Xiaohua's expression changed greatly. Because although there was noble chi in the heaven and earth origin chi, this noble chi was abnormally pure, and there was no Confucian aura at all. It did not even have the kind of mortal aura that Confucian cultivators needed to cultivate. Is this the ancient times? Xiao Hua came to a realization and hurriedly looked around again. Sure enough, the mountain rocks on the mountain peak were huge, and the ancient trees were also huge. Even the grass on the mountain rocks looked similar to Xiao Hua's height. It really looked like the great, desolate world of the ruins. Xiao Hua was completely dumbfounded, and he stood in the air, looking at the great, desolate world around him. His lips moved, but in the end, he did not say anything. At this moment, his heart felt empty, like a cloud floating in the sky without anything to rely on. Originally, he had the opportunity to stay in the ruins and even establish a sect in the ruins. However, he didn't stay. He found many excuses for himself in his heart. For example, the cultivators of the ruins cultivated the primordial spirit while he cultivated the nascent soul. It was not suitable for him to stay in the ruins. However, in reality, the Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua cultivated the primordial spirit. Why couldn't Xiao Hua cultivate it himself? Moreover, even if Xiao Hua cultivates his nascent soul, his scattered soul can also cultivate his primordial spirit. For example, if the ruins were to be destroyed by the prehistoric starstorm, Xiao Hua would have no choice but to leave the ruins. However, in reality, since Wu Tian had the confidence to avoid the prehistoric starstorm, why couldn't Xiao Hua avoid it? Among all the cultivators in the ruins, Xiao Hua was probably the only one who was truly qualified and had the strength to avoid the starburst, right? All excuses were just excuses. They couldn't hide Xiao Hua's desire to return to the hidden, immortal mainland. This desire was not only for the revival of the Tao sect, not only for Xian, but also for the possibility of meeting Fairy Hong Xia again. However, time played a huge joke on Xiao Hua. He did find the spiritual will mark he left behind in the Great Snow Mountain. Moreover, he did try his best to return to the ultimate land of bliss. However, this ultimate land of bliss was not his ultimate land of bliss. It was the ancient ultimate land of bliss. It belonged to the ancient ultimate land of bliss where Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, and demons fought for supremacy. The people he was familiar with and the things he was familiar with had all become the smoke of the future. Whether it was Fairy Hong Xia or Xian, they did not exist in this mainland. The indescribable depression was like a dark cloud that covered Xiao Hua's empty heart. However, even if it was a dark cloud, Xiao Hua's mind was also slowly floating and rising. At this moment, Xiao Hua didn't want to think about anything and didn't want to do anything. It was as if he was extremely tired and wanted to rest. He allowed his mind to float up. The higher he flew, the farther he could see. The ancient, desolate land turned into a sand table in Xiao Hua's eyes. Although this sand table was boundless, the mountain peak was already like a pellet. Unfortunately, this scene was nothing to the current Xiao Hua. He came from the earth, fire, wind, and thunder realms and had already seen the ninth heaven. He didn't care about this simple bird's eye view. The land was far away, so the starry sky was naturally close. Above Xiao Hua's mind, in the sky, the sun star and the moon star were hanging opposite each other. Countless bright stars were like eyes, blinking at Xiao Hua. The truth of heaven and earth contained in the stars also fell into Xiao Hua's mind in the blink of an eye. Seeing this starry sky, Xiao Hua of the heavenly Tao immediately trembled. Comprehension poured into Xiao Hua's mind like a flood, as if a blocked dam had suddenly been opened. Wong, wong, wong. Xiao Hua's mind gradually turned into a jade archive in the sky, allowing thousands of inexplicable fluctuations to fall into it. In the starry sky, all the stars gave birth to halos, and billions of starlight from the other realms fell into jade archive Xiao Hua's body. Xiao Hua's mind was filled with a kind of perfection similar to a reunion after a long separation. Whether it was Xiao Hua's Tao cultivation or Confucian cultivation, all of his divine abilities grew rapidly in this perfection. Perhaps it was an instant, perhaps it was millions of years. Even Xiao Hua didn't know when it flew out from the space. That big hand seemed to want to grab the stars in the sky and directly grab at the starry sky. All of a sudden, Jade Archive, Xiao Hua's body trembled. All of his astral energy disappeared, and all of his comprehension was annihilated. Even the image of Jade Archive Xiao Hua disappeared, leaving only Xiao Hua's mind staring at the starry sky in a daze. An uncontrollable ecstasy ignited the hope in his heart. He muttered to himself, "No, this is not the ultimate paradise. The ultimate paradise's starry sky is not like this. This starry sky, I seem to have seen it before. Moreover, this starry sky is engraved with the first stroke of my comprehension of the heavenly Tao. This is perhaps the place I have been bitterly searching for." Xiao Hua's mind just had some comprehension, but suddenly, a kind of extreme terror emerged from the bottom of his heart. He couldn't help but look at a certain place in the starry sky. Over there, a strange distortion was slowly taking shape. Not good. Xiao Hua's mind was startled, and he immediately fell from the sky into his body. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at the starry sky that was already gone, and he secretly shouted, "Could it be? There is an enemy that can kill this Xiao? Did that enemy just happen to pass by, or did he follow me here? Could it be a demon lord from the demon realm?" Thinking of this, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent, and he hurriedly invited the green-robed Xiao Hua out of the space. Without waiting for the green-robed Xiao Hua to see the situation clearly, he immediately asked, "Green-robed fellow Taoist, I want to ask you, can other people use the teleportation array that you and I set up in the ruins?" The green-robed Xiao Hua was startled, and then he sensed the panic and doubt in Xiao Hua's heart, and he hurriedly replied, "Let me tell you, fellow Taoist, that teleportation array is activated by a soul technique, and it can only be used when combined with the way south opposite north technique, and it doesn't require primordial stones. Therefore, other than fellow Taoist, other people can't use it. Moreover, fellow Taoist, don't forget that there is no teleportation array here that is connected to that teleportation array. So how can other people use it? And if that's the case, I can be at ease." Xiao Hua nodded. "In that case, I's warning sign is probably not an enemy chasing after us, but the power of heaven and earth similar to the great desolate star storm. It should be," the green-robed Xiao Hua said with a smile. "If this is the great desolate star and not the ancient ultimate paradise, then it means that we are still in the upper realm. With our origins, how can we still have enemies in the upper realm? If the demon Venerable chases after us, it's also possible." Xiao Hua still didn't feel at ease and replied, "Big brother, don't be afraid." The devil spirit Xiao Hua said, "The demon Venerable won't come out unless there is a great temptation. Everything about Big Brother hasn't been exposed, so the demon Venerable won't have any ideas about Big Brother. Moreover, Little Brother is currently devouring the devil spirit of the demon array. Previously, when Big Brother was comprehending, Little Brother had already devoured more than half of it. After devouring for another 100 years, Little Brother will also be able to surpass the Demon Emperor, and at that time, maybe I can also become a Demon Venerable. 100 years. Xiao Hua smiled bitterly. It would be good if it was 100 years. I's warning sign is too powerful, and all the previous warnings can't be compared to it. Even the heavenly prison can't be compared to it. Therefore, I'm afraid I can't wait 100 years. Then what should we do? The devil spirit Xiao Hua was somewhat dumbfounded. I is very familiar with the starry sky of this place, and it's different from the Western paradise. Perhaps I also stayed here before I was stranded in the Dawn Rain continent. Xiao Hua said in a low voice, "It's also because I cultivated here that this place has the divine sense mark that I left behind. So, the divine sense mark that I sensed in the ruins was here, and not the Great Snow Mountain. Even I suspect that the divine sense mark that I sensed in the heavenly prison was also here." "Yes, it must be so," the soul cultivator Xiao Hua also said. "Otherwise, fellow Taoist wouldn't feel that the divine sense mark is somewhat unfamiliar. If that's the case, we can use the soul cultivation technique again to sense the divine sense mark of the Great Snow Mountain, and then teleport back from here," Xiao Hua said with slight hesitation. As soon as he said that, the green-robed Xiao Hua shook his head slightly again and said, "Fellow Taoist, I think you already have some awareness in your heart. Things may not be as simple as you say. From here, or from the ruins, It's not a simple teleportation array that can reach the Western paradise. Alas, Xiao Hua sighed and frowned. Fellow Taoist is right. The three continents are the lower realm, and the ruins are the upper realm. If there's no accident, this place should be an upper realm similar to the ruins. A simple teleportation array can't break the barrier between the two realms and teleport us back. The heavenly prison on the hidden immortal continent, if I guessed correctly, should be a spatial crack in the upper realm. Because this crack belongs to the upper realm, it's filled with time fragments, and no cultivator from the three continents can survive inside. -13. Chapter 4183. Are you kidding me? Xiaohua was a little dumbfounded. Looking at the stone giant that was more than 10 zhang tall, he thought to himself, this thing can actually cry? Or perhaps, this isn't crying? But if this isn't crying, then what is it? However, looking at the stone giant's slightly trembling shoulders and trembling legs, it didn't seem to be fake. Xiaohua suddenly had a kind of realization. Damn it, although this guy looks huge, could it be that he's still a child? Thinking that he actually bullied a child, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel ashamed. He raised his hand and picked up the stone giant's finger that fell on the stone platform, brought it in front of the stone giant, and lightly poked his arm. That finger wasn't much different from a stone, but there was some warm flow of fire inside. When the finger touched the stone giant's arm, it made a ka-ka sound, exactly like a stone hitting a stone. The stone giant stared blankly, revealing a somewhat red eye from inside his arm. At this moment, the panic in his eyes had already disappeared, replaced by grievance. Moreover, seeing his broken finger, the stone giant once again burst into tears, no different from an injured child. Ai, it really is a child. Xiaohua sighed. He waved his hand, and the broken finger once again poked the stone giant. Only then did the stone giant slightly listen to the crying. He curiously looked at Xiaohua and reached out to take it. Then, the stone giant saw that Xiaohua's expression was very kind and didn't have any evil intentions. Then, he looked at the empty space under Xiaohua's feet. Although there were tears in his eyes, he still opened his mouth, pointed at Xiaohua's feet, and cried. Then, Xiaohua of course didn't understand what he was saying. He only shook his head and said, "Little guy, could it be that you don't know how to speak?" Then, the stone giant still said the same two words. Presumably, these two words were all he could say. I guess he hasn't grown up yet, so he doesn't know how to speak. Xiaohua bitterly smiled, not to mention that he doesn't understand what I'm saying. After thinking for a moment, Xiaohua asked again, "Little guy, where are you from? I'll bring you back, okay?" Then, the stone giant didn't say anything else. Xiaohua was somewhat helpless. He thought for a moment and took out a few fire attribute top-grade primeval stones from his bosom. However, when he handed them over to the stone giant, Xiaohua was careful and changed these top-grade primeval stones into low-grade primeval stones. Sure enough, when the stone giant saw these yuan stones, he was extremely happy. He hurriedly extended his arm to ask Xiaohua for them. After he placed the yuan stones into his mouth and chewed them with crunching sounds, his large mouth opened and a smile appeared. However, this smile was reflected in the hot magma at the corner of his eyes, making it appear somewhat strange. Then, after the stone giant finished eating the primordial stone, it seemed as if it still wanted more. It raised its hand and asked for more. It was completely like a child who had seen snacks in the secular world. Xiaohua smiled as he shook his head, placing several origin stones into his hand. At this moment, a faint sound came from the distant mountain valley. Although this sound was very soft, it traveled extremely far due to the mountain wind. Hearing this sound, the stone giant's face tensed up and he hurriedly looked up at the sky. At this moment, the sun had already set and the moon had yet to rise. The bright stars in the sky were already hanging in the night sky. Seeing that it was late, the stone giant couldn't help but panic. When he stood up, he hesitated for a moment. The fingers on his left hand were broken and he had just fallen down, so he seemed to have some lingering fear. Moreover, the night was shrouded and the entire mountain peak couldn't be seen clearly. The stone giant didn't dare to rashly go down. Then, the stone giant anxiously opened its mouth and shouted towards the distance. Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry to help. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and raised his head to look at the sky. The stars in the sky were exactly the same as what he saw during the day. However, when he looked at them now, the feeling was completely different. During the day, it was mostly comprehension. During the night, it was mostly warmth and memories. It was a somewhat distant warmth and feelings. In addition, when he saw the childish actions of the stone giant, the weakness in Xiaohua's heart was immediately touched. It was as if the entire starry sky was his home. His unfamiliarity with this continent was instantly reduced by more than half. This place must have a close relationship with this Xiao. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and let the night wind blow his Taoist robe up. He wantonly enjoyed this kind of warmth. He let the gradually rising moonlight sprinkle on his body like water. It was just like that night when it sprinkled on the small house in the mountain village. Then, a hurried call woke Xiaohua up. This voice was filled with anxiety and concern. Xiaohua, who was feeling emotional, immediately heard it. Although it was only 2 words, it was overflowing with affection. Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He seemed to have understood something. Could it be? This stone giant's family can only say 2 words? Then, the small stone giant on the mountainside also replied. The stone giant at the foot of the mountain sped up its then, as if it was scolding. Then, the small stone giant replied a few times, feeling wronged. It sat down again and stuck its head out to look at the darkness at the foot of the mountain. After a long time, a stone giant that was several times larger than the small stone giant carefully climbed from the darkness at the foot of the mountain to the stone wall illuminated by the moonlight. At this moment, the stone giant sped up again and quickly climbed up to the stone platform. Then, the small stone giant had already made way for the stone giant. When it saw the stone giant climb up, it immediately pounced on it. Then, it shouted. The stone giant originally raised its arm as if it wanted to hit the small stone giant. However, when it saw the small stone giant hugging it, it gently lowered its arm and patted the small stone giant's back as if to comfort it. Then, after a while, the stone giant opened its mouth and asked. The small stone giant stuck its head out of the stone giant's chest and pointed at the high mountain cave. It explained again. Then, in the distance, Xiaohua really didn't understand. Why did these 2 words contain so much information? Then, the stone giant was obviously worried about its child and hid in the cave. When it saw the small stone giant's left hand missing a finger, its expression changed greatly and it interrupted the small stone giant's words. The small stone giant took out its broken finger and pointed at Xiaohua, who was not far away. It shouted, then. When the stone giant heard this, it turned pale with fright and hurriedly looked at Xiaohua. Then, without any hesitation, it put the small stone giant behind it and shouted, then. This time, the stone giant's voice was hurried and carried a hint of threat. Xiaohua immediately understood the meaning of these words. Seeing the fire in the stone giant's eyes, Xiaohua smiled faintly. His figure floated a few feet away and looked at the stone giant indifferently. Then, the small stone giant behind the stone giant said a few words in a low voice. The stone giant also asked a few words. Then, it slowly relaxed its guard. It actually put its palms together and respectfully bowed to Xiaohua to thank him. Seeing the stone giant's very standard Buddhist gesture, Xiaohua was dumbfounded again. He couldn't help but ask, "Sir, on this continent, is there a Buddhist sect?" Then, the stone giant obviously didn't understand what he was saying and still used 2 words to reply. "Sigh, forget it." Xiaohua was helpless and didn't answer. Then, the small stone giant took out the fire element primordial stone and showed it to the stone giant. The stone giant nodded and looked at Xiaohua. It pointed at the fire element primordial stone and then pointed at itself. Xiaohua understood and took out a few more fire element primordial stones and gave them to the stone giant. However, the stone giant waved its hand, indicating that it didn't want them. Then, The stone giant put the small stone giant on its shoulder and beckoned to Xiaohua. It then slowly descended from the stone platform to the foot of the mountain. Xiaohua didn't think too much. He raised his eyes and looked at the familiar starry sky. His figure followed the stone giant as it descended. He understood that this continent was full of mysteries. This stone giant was probably the key to opening this mysterious door. The stone giant carefully climbed down from the mountain peak and looked at Xiaohua, who was standing in the air behind it. Its big mouth cracked open as if it was smiling. Then, it took a big step forward. Dong, 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 sounds could be heard from the ground. The stone giant took big strides and ran towards a place in the valley. The small stone giant was lying on the stone giant's back. It seemed that it was overly frightened and had fallen into a deep sleep. Its vertical eyes were tightly shut. The stone giant walked for more than 100 li. However, this distance was nothing in the huge mountain range. It didn't even cross 2 mountain ranges. However, after crossing a broken mountain foothill, the stone giant's figure clearly slowed down. Moreover, the sound of its footsteps also became a lot softer. Under the moonlight, the stone giant's eyes flashed with flames from time to time, as if it was on guard against something. Woo! Just when the stone giant turned its head and wanted to warn Xiaohua, a strange sound suddenly came from a corner of the mountain foothill. Xiaohua raised his head indifferently and saw a strange bird that was dozens of zhang in size. It looked like a huge rock rolling down from the night sky. When it got close to the stone giant, it spread its wings and a sharp claw that was several zhang in size appeared on its abdomen and grabbed towards the stone giant's back. The stone giant was obviously startled. Its one eye that was already on guard immediately opened. A reddish-yellow pillar of fire shot out from its one eye and attacked the strange bird. Pooh! That strange bird was also extremely powerful. Its sharp claw grabbed the air. Without any magic power fluctuation, it directly grabbed the pillar of fire into two. Moreover, when the strange bird flapped its wings, pitch-black water droplets fell from its wings like rain. Pa, pa. They fell on the stone giant and the small stone giant. Zzz, zzz, zzz. The pitch-black water droplets fell on the two stone giants' bodies and immediately emitted a corrosive sound. It was like cold water falling on hot oil. -13. Chapter 4184. Then, the little stone giant, who was originally sleeping soundly, immediately woke up from the pain and couldn't help but scream loudly. Then, the stone giant hurriedly shouted in a low voice. Then, he suddenly gave up fighting with the strange birds and fled in another direction. On his body and the little stone giant's body, the water droplets splashed by the strange birds corroded thumb-sized deep holes. Sure enough, as soon as the stone giant took off, a dozen strange cries came from the foothills. Caw, caw. A flock of strange birds flew out. The largest of these birds were 1,000 feet long, while the smallest was 100 feet long. They flapped their wings and pounced on the stone giant. Even a few strange birds noticed Xiaohua and turned their heads to pounce on him. The stone giant ran for more than 100 steps before he saw a huge rock in front of him. Without any hesitation, he threw the little stone giant into the huge rock and bent down to pick up a huge rock that was more than 100 feet in size. He shouted, then he raised his arms and the huge rock let out a howl and charged toward the strange bird at the front. Puff! The strange bird was caught off guard. It spat out a pitch-black liquid from its mouth and hurriedly flapped its wings to dodge. Sizzle! The liquid in the strange bird's mouth was very corrosive. When it fell on the huge rock, it corroded a big hole in it. However, the huge rock came too fast for the strange bird to dodge. With a loud bang, the huge rock hit the strange bird's head. The strange bird's body was immediately sent flying by the huge rock and fell to the ground with a loud bang. It also let out a mournful cry. While the stone giant was delayed, the dozen strange birds had already flown close. Swish, swish. The dozen pairs of wings flapped and water droplets fell, covering the stone giant. Then, the stone giant shouted and squatted down again. He picked up the huge rocks on the ground and threw them into the sky without looking back. Boom, boom. The huge rocks flew into the sky one after another. Because the stone giant's rocks were aimless, other than the first few that hit the strange birds, the rest were all useless. After the group of strange birds dispersed, they rushed towards the stone giant from all directions. The rain-like water droplets continued to fall from all directions. The stone giant's body emitted sizzling sounds. Xiao Hua could clearly see that the stone giant's forehead was dripping with magma-like sweat. Its mouth was also tightly stretched. At that moment, in the distance, the small stone giant had only managed to utter a single word before it stopped. It was as if it had forcefully swallowed it back in. The stone giant was shocked. He raised his head and saw the little stone giant's yellow eyes filled with determination and forbearance. On top of the huge rock, a strange bird was flapping its wings and attacking the little stone giant with water droplets. Then, the stone giant's heart ached. He knew that the little stone giant was injured. He wanted to cry out in pain, but he was afraid that he would be distracted, so he forced himself to endure. The stone giant shouted loudly. He picked up a huge rock in each hand and threw it towards the strange bird that was attacking the little stone giant. At the same time, his single eye that had been holding back suddenly emitted a red light. A pillar of fire shot out from his eye with a loud bang. Caw! Seeing the two huge rocks coming towards it, the strange bird let out a long cry and spread its wings to escape. However, the stone giant's two huge rocks were also ingenious. They didn't directly hit the strange bird's body. Instead, one hit the strange bird's head and the other hit the strange bird's tail. The strange bird couldn't escape forward or backward. The strange bird was stunned for a moment, but it also calmly responded. Its whole body strangely flew horizontally, and the water droplets on its wings took advantage of the momentum to hit the stone giant. However, before the water droplets could land, the stone giant's pillar of fire had already arrived. It landed right in the middle of the two huge rocks, where the body of the bird was sandwiched by the huge rocks. The strange bird was shocked. It tried its best to hit the huge rocks, wanting to escape. However, the stone giant's pillar of fire hit at the perfect time. Sizzle. There was also a chaotic sound. The strange bird's water droplets were extinguished by the pillar of fire. The pillar of fire crazily crashed into the strange bird's body. Not only did it ignite the strange bird's feathers, but it also pierced through the strange bird's body. The strange bird only had time to let out a low cry before its entire body turned into a fireball and fell to the ground. Then, after killing the strange bird, the stone giant didn't dare to be negligent. Its body agilely pounced on the small stone giant. Looking at the strange birds behind the stone giant, they were still orderly before. However, when they saw the stone giant's pillar of fire and the strange bird's fireball hit, they all went crazy. They flapped their wings crazily and pounced on the two stone giants. Woo-woo-woo. The stone giant landed beside the small stone giant and hugged it. Immediately after, a yellow halo appeared around its body. Then, as the stone giant fled to the side of the foothill, the 3 fingers on its right arm moved rapidly. Stones that weren't particularly large were driven by the stone giant and flew into the air. The strength of these stones wasn't as great as before, but there were many of them. The stone giant's goal was obviously to disrupt and not kill. Sure enough, the strange birds were very afraid of these stones. They scattered in all directions, giving the stone giant time to escape. However, the stone giant's running speed was far slower than that of the strange birds. In just half the time it took to eat a meal, the stone giant was forced to a stone wall by the strange birds. Seeing dozens of strange birds fiercely pouncing on it, some of them even spitting out pitch-black liquid from their mouths, the stone giant looked up to the sky and shouted. Then, his voice was very miserable. Then, after spitting out another pillar of fire from its eyes, the stone giant turned around and covered the small stone giant under its body, exposing its back to the strange birds. Under the moonlight, the stone giant's back revealed small spots. Boom! The stone giant's pillar of fire shot out and hit a strange bird. At the same time that strange bird turned into a fireball, another loud sound rang out. A curtain of fire that was nearly 100 times larger than the fireball appeared out of thin air. Although it didn't engulf all the strange birds, it still blocked the two stone giants behind the curtain of fire. On the other side of the curtain of fire, Xiao Hua stood in midair as if he was thinking about something. Jiji. The strange birds seemed unwilling to give up. They all pounced on the curtain of fire. Whether it was their wings or their beaks, they spat out a lot of pitch-black liquid. Some of the larger strange birds even fanned out some wind blades. Unfortunately, how could these strange birds' attacks break through the curtain of fire that Xiao Hua casually set up? After a moment, these strange birds saw that their attacks had no effect, so they tactfully flew away. Xiao Hua withdrew the curtain of fire and still stood in midair with a smile on his face. His gaze was also gentle as he watched the stone giant use its body to block the small stone giant. It seemed that this side of family made the evil aura that had infected him from the Taoist devil war disappear a lot. Seeing that the strange birds didn't attack, the stone giant also turned its head and looked at the night sky with some astonishment. The small stone giant even peeked out its single eye from the side of the stone giant's body to peek. Seeing that not a single strange bird was left in the night sky, the small stone giant couldn't help but whisper, Then. The stone giant raised its body and proudly patted its chest a few times, as if it was showing off. Then, the stone giant grabbed the small stone giant's body and jumped out of the stone wall, then fled forward. However, after fleeing for another 100 zhong, the stone giant seemed to think of something. It patted its head and turned its head to look for Xiao Hua. This old man is here. Xiao Hua hurriedly flew over and raised his hand to greet the stone giant. Then, the stone giant patted its chest and pointed at Xiao Hua again. Then, it pointed into the distance and beckoned Xiao Hua to quickly follow it. Xiao Hua faintly smiled, nodded slightly, and followed behind the stone giant. However, after walking for a few li, the stone giant became careful again and lightened its footsteps. Xiao Hua frowned and released his divine sense. However, he could only see for a few li gg. A soft roar like that of a mouse came from not far away. Although the sound was soft, it immediately made the stone giant tremble. Previously, it didn't fear the strange birds at all, but now, it was actually standing there and looking pitifully into the distance. In the dark night, a ball of golden brilliance that was only a few feet in size quickly rushed over. Inside the brilliance was a small child wearing armor and holding a weapon that looked like a spear in his hand. Damn it! A group of demons dancing wildly. Xiao Hua glanced around and withdrew his divine sense. He smiled and said, During the day, I used my divine sense to see tens of thousands of li and didn't see anything. However, at night, everything comes out. Then, the small stone giant also saw the small golden armored person and couldn't help but cry out. Suddenly, it looked at Xiao Hua and pointed at him with all its strength, as if it was worried about Xiao Hua. Just as Xiao Hua was about to speak, a ray of light suddenly appeared in the distant horizon. This ray of light was seven-colored and formed a jade necklace in the night sky. Under this seven-colored light, even the moonlight high up in the sky lost its splendor. What was special was that after the ray of light, several roars came from all over the continent. Waves of desolate power surged out in all directions like a surging tide. Within this power, there was a vague shadow that crossed the restless night and flew towards the ray of light. This desolate power was so ferocious that although it rushed to where Xiao Hua was, whether it was the small golden armored person or the stone giant, they both prostrated themselves on the ground and trembled in fear. Oh, a desolate powerhouse? Facing this nameless power, Xiao Hua was also shocked. While urging his secret technique to resist, he narrowed his eyes and looked at the ray of light. He didn't dare to rashly release his divine sense and thought to himself, What is this ray of light? However, in just a few breaths, the ray of light immediately fell and disappeared without a trace. Only the nameless power annihilated Xiao Hua's surroundings. Xiao Hua's figure flickered and instantly disappeared. However, after a while, Xiao Hua reappeared not far away. He looked at the two stone giants lying on the ground and then looked at the small golden armored person not far away. After thinking for a while, he called out Dragon Vein Xiaohua and Phoenix Body Xiaohua and said with a smile, "I still have some things to do. I'll have to trouble you two fellow Taoists." -13. Chapter 4185. Fellow Taoist, you're really interesting. The Dragon Vein Xiaohua said with a smile, "That place is obviously a secret treasure, and it might even contain the secrets of this continent. Fellow Taoist, you didn't personally explore it, but instead stayed here to protect two stone giants that you don't know. Fellow Taoist's actions really make I puzzled." Phoenix Body Xiaohua was also puzzled. Fellow Taoist, even if you want to protect two stones that aren't human, you only need to throw the golden armored little person far away. Why do you have to stay here? Xiaohua's originally curved phoenix eyes were now curved like crescent moons. He said with a smile, "Although you two have already become independent adults, you still don't have the emotions of a true cultivator. The affection of these stone giants is really touching. If I don't send these two stone giants back to their home, I won't be able to rest assured. Moreover, to tell you the truth, I have a feeling that the karma of these two stone giants is more important than the secret treasure in the distance." Dragon Vein Xiaohua and Phoenix Body Xiaohua naturally didn't have Xiaohua's karma. They both smiled at each other and flew towards the place where the multicolored light disappeared. Xiaohua was still standing in the air, quietly waiting. After the time it took to eat a meal, the aura that suppressed everything gradually disappeared. The golden-armored little person was the first to get up from the ground. However, when the little person looked at the two stone giants on the ground, he didn't have any thoughts of attacking. He shrunk his neck and looked around, then turned around and ran away. Then, the golden-armored little person left. Only then did the stone giant straighten up. He awkwardly got up and ran in another direction. Only after running for a while did he remember Xiaohua. He turned his head again and waved at Xiaohua. Perhaps because of the change just now, they didn't encounter any special beasts in the next few mountain ridges. Looking at the vermilion mountain ridges in front of him and the hot air in front of him, Xiaohua understood that this was probably the stone giant's home. Previously, when Xiaohua looked down from high up in the sky, he didn't feel that it was too far away. However, when he really ran all the way with the stone giant, he realized the true distance. Then, Xiaohua turned his head to look. Sure enough, the mountain peak that he had fallen from earlier just happened to be exposed in the distant mountain ridge. He reckoned that the little stone giant had seen something strange nearby and ran so far away alone to look for something. Then, the stone giant led Xiaohua into the mountain ridge and circled around to the side of a huge boulder. He pointed at the boulder and pointed at it a few times before turning around and leaving. When Xiaohua heard the stone giant say so many then, he finally understood the meaning of these two words. He smiled and calmly stood there. Xiaohua released his divine sense and watched as the stone giant tiptoed around a few times, crossing over a dozen large stones. It even turned around to check if Xiaohua was following. Xiaohua couldn't help but laugh in his heart, because right in front of the stone giant's head, there was a large amount of magma exposed on the ground. If Xiaohua didn't know that the stone giant had magma inside its body, then it would be fine. But since he knew, how could he not know that the stone giant's cave was inside the magma? Sure enough, when the stone giant walked to the magma, the little stone giant jumped down from his body and happily jumped into the magma. The stone giant also walked to the magma and slowly submerged his body in the magma. When the stone giant's figure disappeared, Xiaohua's divine sense swept over the magma and then withdrew it. Xiaohua had also seen the magma before, but he didn't look into its depths. Naturally, he didn't know that there was a world inside the magma. After the time it took to eat a meal, the stone giant came out of the magma. Large drops of magma flowed on the surface of his body. The marks left by the strange bird's attack had already gradually disappeared. The stone giant walked out and arrived in front of Xiaohua. He stretched out his hand, and in his hand were several mid-grade fire attribute primordial stones. Then, the stone giant placed the fire attribute primordial stones in front of Xiaohua and shouted. His body was still emitting flames. Looking at the fire attribute primordial stones, Xiaohua suddenly realized that the stone giant had brought him here to repay his kindness of saving the little stone giant. He was giving him the primordial stones. Xiaohua smiled and slightly waved his hand. He pushed the fire attribute primordial stones to the stone giant, indicating that he didn't want them. Then, the stone giant was somewhat puzzled. He scratched his head and pushed the primordial stones in front of Xiaohua again. Xiaohua thought for a moment and took out a few top-grade primordial stones from his bosom. He spread them on his palm and showed them to the stone giant. Then, the stone giant saw the top-grade primordial stones in Xiaohua's hand and immediately exclaimed. He stretched out his hand to grab the primordial stones, but his hand stopped in front of the primordial stones. Even the magma on his arm dripped onto Xiaohua's hand. The stone giant obviously didn't notice that the magma on Xiaohua's hand didn't cause any movement. He hurriedly waved his hand and pointed at the boulder where Xiaohua was. Then, he said a few more times and hurriedly turned around. Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. He looked at the fire attribute primordial stones in his hand and rubbed his chin as he looked at the magma flowing from the stone giant's body. He seemed to be lost in thought. Not long after, another stone giant that was 3 times bigger than the previous one quickly ran over. The previous stone giant followed behind this stone giant. When this stone giant saw Xiaohua, he immediately shouted, "So dense, so dense." He also put his palms together and saluted. Hee. It seems that he said one more word than the previous stone giant. Xiaohua laughed in his heart. He also put his palms together and saluted back. He didn't say anything. After a very strange salute, the stone giant stretched out a finger that was comparable to a tree and pointed at Xiaohua's hand. He asked, "So dense, so dense." Xiaohua was already calm and unafraid of the other side's all-encompassing, "so dense," let alone the "so dense" that was one more word than "so dense." Xiaohua understood and waved his hand. Several top-grade primordial stones fell into the stone giant's hand. The stone giant took the top-grade primordial stones and placed them in his hand. A faint flame was emitted from his single eye. The flame illuminated the night sky and caused the top-grade primordial stones to flash with flames. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the stone giant finished looking at the top-grade primordial stones one by one. He then carefully returned the primordial stones to Xiaohua. Xiaohua's impression of these stone giants immediately increased. He waved his hand, indicating that he didn't want the primordial stones and gave them to the stone giant. Unexpectedly, the stone giant shook his head and put the top-grade primordial stones in front of Xiaohua. He put his palms together again and respectfully prostrated himself on the ground. He then put his palm in front of Xiaohua and said, "So dense, so dense." Behind the stone giant, the previous stone giant also prostrated himself on the ground. It didn't seem like he was prostrating, but rather a welcoming ceremony. Xiaohua naturally wasn't afraid that there was something fishy. He almost didn't think about it and floated onto the stone giant's palm. "So dense, so dense." The stone giant was very happy. He carefully lifted Xiaohua in front of his chest and brought the previous stone giant back to the magma. When the stone giant walked in front of the magma, a scarlet halo appeared around his body. This halo came out from his palm and protected Xiaohua. The magma emitted gurgling bubbles, just like what Xiaohua saw in the flame forest swamp of the Xiaoyu continent. The stone giant's feet and body were steady, as if there were stairs in the magma. After walking for a while, the 2 stone giants turned around and continued to walk up. When the 2 finally walked out of the magma, Xiaohua was actually in a space that was several hundred li in size. Xiaohua's divine sense swept out and immediately saw clearly that most of the space was filled with magma. Aside from some small island-like, protruding rocks within the magma, there were only some vermilion red rocks at the edges of the magma. These rocks were similarly burning with thin flames, roasting the space to an extreme degree. The stone giant respectfully placed Xiaohua on the burning rocks, as if the flames on the rocks were ordinary grass. He didn't even think about whether Xiaohua could withstand it. Xiaohua naturally wasn't afraid of these flames and high temperature. He stepped on the magma. "So secret, so secret." As the stone giant spoke, he respectfully clasped his hands together and bowed. Then, he turned around and walked into the ocean-like magma. In just a moment, his figure disappeared. Xiaohua wanted to use his divine sense to chase after him, but he was a gentleman. Now that he was invited here, he naturally wouldn't look into other people's secrets. Therefore, he opened his mouth and wanted to say something to the stone giant. However, after opening his mouth, he swallowed his words back down. Xiaohua really couldn't stand the stone giant's omnipotent, so. At this moment, a hoarse and weak voice came from the magma lake in the distance. A stone giant floated over from the magma. When it rushed to the top of the rock, it looked like a dying person lying there. The stone giant beside Xiaohua looked at the stone giant in the distance and then looked at Xiaohua. He took out the primeval stones he wanted to give Xiaohua and pointed at the stone giant in the distance. He asked, So? Xiaohua was quite puzzled. He was confused, but he still nodded. The stone giant was very happy and rushed towards the stone giant's location. Xiaohua's heart was moved, and his figure fluttered as he followed the stone giant. The stone giant came to the side of the stone giant and put several primeval stones into the stone giant's mouth. Crunch, crunch. The stone giant greedily chewed the primeval stones, just like a mortal who saw food. After a while, a scarlet halo appeared around the stone giant's body. Then, the stone giant was brimming with energy. He raised his hand and hammered the shoulder of the stone giant beside Xiaohua a few times. He seemed to be calling out gratefully, so. The stone giant smiled and replied. It also hammered the shoulder of the stone giant. Looking at the stone giant that ate the primeval stones and then entered the magma lake, Xiaohua somewhat understood. The fire primeval stones should be the stone giant's food. The stone giant just now was probably hungry. -13. Chapter 4186. Then, the stone giant raised his hands as if he wanted to explain something to Xiaohua. The tone of his mouth was very apologetic. He should be apologizing for giving the primordial stones that were originally meant for Xiaohua to another stone giant. Xiaohua laughed. He didn't dare to ask whether the stone giant understood him or not. He laughed and said, Saving your son was as easy as lifting a finger. In addition, it was me who scared him into falling. It doesn't matter if you give me the primordial stones or not. Then, of course, the stone giant didn't understand what Xiaohua was saying. However, he still laughed happily. His big mouth split open to both sides of his head. The stone giant accompanied Xiaohua at the side of the magma. After half a meal's time, he didn't see the stone giant come back. Xiaohua took a breath of extremely pure fire, attributed primordial energy of heaven and earth. He felt very comfortable. No matter where in this world, it was the dream of cultivators to cultivate. It was no wonder that there were so many almighty people in the ancient times. Then, another voice sounded. The little stone giant that Xiaohua saved also walked out of the magma. Looking at Xiaohua beside the stone giant, he timidly walked over and whispered. The stone giant slightly shook his head. He said with difficulty, Then he pointed at the magma, hinting the little stone giant to go back. The little stone giant pitifully walked 2 steps. He turned his head again and looked at the stone giant, unwilling to move. Then, the stone giant seemed to be angry. He raised his hand and clenched 3 fingers together to threaten the little stone giant. The little stone giant was helpless. He could only walk back to the magma. However, after he entered the magma, he turned his head and looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua's heart moved. He quickly raised his hand and took out a low-grade primordial stone. He said with a smile, Little guy, do you want this thing? Then, the little stone giant immediately cheered. He jumped out of the magma and quickly rushed in front of Xiaohua. He snatched the low-grade primordial stone and stuffed it into his mouth. The stone giant beside Xiaohua seemed to be a little embarrassed. He lowered his head and didn't express his intention. Xiaohua was a little confused. This place had such pure primordial energy of heaven and earth and so much magma. How could there be no fire attributed primordial stones? However, when he released his divine sense slightly, he came to a realization. This was because there were many rock giants swimming and lying in the lava within a few miles of the area. Although Xiao Hua didn't look into the distance, he absolutely believed that within these several hundred miles of magma, there were definitely even more stone giants. If they ate fire attribute source stones as food, then no matter how many source stones were condensed within the magma, it wouldn't be enough for them to eat. Moreover, looking at the little stone giant that had recovered its vigor and vitality, Xiao Hua understood even more clearly that this little fellow had probably seen him coming from beyond the heavens and thought that there would be some kind of opportunity. That was why it had run so far and passed by so many territories occupied by its natural enemies to look for delicious food. As for the stone giant, in order to thank Xiao Hua, it also gave him the few source stones it had. In Xiao Hua's eyes, source stones were source stones, but in the stone giant's eyes, they were the most precious thing. It was his life. Xiao Hua was a compassionate person. The actions of the two stone giants had moved him even more. He had the heart to help these stone giants. However, the stone giants weren't humans. Although there were source stones in Xiao Hua's space, these source stones weren't of good quality. No matter how much Xiao Hua gave them, they would eventually be used up. What Xiao Hua wanted to do was to find a way to solve this problem once and for all. Just as Xiao Hua was pondering, a burst of sound came from the magma. This sound fell into Xiao Hua's ears like thunder, causing him to be dumbfounded. Xiao Hua looked at the magma lake in disbelief. He saw the magma lake, which was thousands of feet deep, began to violently stir. Bubbles of several zhang in size emerged from the magma lake. Along with these bubbles, there was the sound of a wooden fish being struck. In front of Xiao Hua's dumbfounded eyes, a 1,000-foot-tall stone giant walked out of the lava lake. This stone giant's face was full of wrinkles, just like layers upon layers of rock. Behind this stone giant were several smaller stone giants, each of them holding a stone wooden fish. These stone wooden fish were probably the largest wooden fish Xiao Hua had ever seen. Each of these stone wooden fish was dozens of feet long, and each of the stone giants held stone rods that were dozens of feet long. As they struck these stone wooden fish, a crisp sound rang out. The last stone giant to appear from the magma lake was the stone giant who had previously entered the magma lake to report. At this time, the stone giant stepped on the waves and respectfully clasped his hands together and said, "So dense, so dense." Xiao Hua knew that the origin of this seemingly old stone giant was extraordinary. He also urged his body to step on the magma lake and meet the stone giant. Seeing that there was nothing wrong with Xiao Hua's body stepping on the magma lake, the old stone giant's eyes were filled with astonishment. Only when Xiao Hua flew closer did the stone giant wake up. He clasped his hands together and said, "Namo Maitreya Buddha." Xiao Hua was already surprised when the old stone giant called out the name of Buddha, but this name of Buddha was actually Namo Maitreya Buddha, which shocked Xiao Hua even more. Xiao Hua was stunned for a moment, then he came back to his senses. He bowed and said, "Namo Maitreya Buddha. Namo Maitreya Buddha. Namo Maitreya Buddha." When the old stone giant heard Xiao Hua's words, he was also happy. However, his eyes flashed with doubt as he asked, Xiao Hua saw the confusion in the old stone giant's eyes, and he himself was even more puzzled. However, in just a few breaths of time, Xiao Hua's head turned rapidly, and his face showed a strange expression. It seemed like he was smiling but not smiling, or he couldn't help laughing. After hearing the old stone giant's name of Namo Maitreya Buddha, Xiao Hua finally understood that the big stone giant and the small stone giant spoke of was not so, but Namo. And the so dense that the stone giant spoke of was not so dense, but Namo Maitreya. Perhaps these three stone giants didn't know how to speak, and only learned these three words. Although Xiao Hua understood the secret, in the face of the all-encompassing Namo Maitreya Buddha, Xiao Hua still didn't know how to answer. However, he only hesitated for a few breaths of time, then he raised his hand and waved. The sound of falling rain could be seen in the air. Tens of thousands of fire element primordial stones appeared out of thin air and fell into the magma lake. Under the old stone giant's dumbstruck expression, a layer of primordial stones covered the magma lake, shining with a gorgeous luster. In an instant, The sound of the wooden fish suddenly stopped. The dozen stone giants holding the wooden fish couldn't help but say in unison, Namo Mithreya Buddha, Namo Mithreya Buddha. Phew. The old stone giant breathed a long sigh of relief. He withdrew his shocked gaze and put his palms together. Namo Mithreya Buddha, Namo Mithreya Buddha. Xiao Hua smiled and said, I don't know why you're chanting Namo Mithreya Buddha, but since you're a disciple of Buddhism, I can't treat you poorly. These origin stones can be considered as a gift from me. Please accept them. As he spoke, he used his hand to draw in the air and sent it to the old stone giant, indicating that all the primordial stones were given to him. Namo Mithreya Buddha. The old stone giant naturally understood. His wrinkled face was filled with joy. He waved his hand and said again. Many stone giants walked forward and waved their hands, controlling the magma lake to collect the primordial stones. Then, the old stone giant respectfully pointed at the magma lake under his feet and said, Namo Mithreya Buddha? Good. Xiao Hua knew that the old stone giant was inviting him to go deeper into the magma lake. He nodded and smiled in agreement. However, when the old stone giant was about to kneel on the magma lake and put his palms together, Xiao Hua hurriedly waved his hand and helped the old stone giant up. He pointed at his nose and then at the magma lake, indicating that he could go down. However, Xiao Hua's gesture was obviously not understood by the old stone giant. Therefore, Xiao Hua simply used an escape technique and entered the magma lake. Seeing that Xiao Hua could freely enter and exit the magma lake, the old stone giant's eyes almost fell out. The respect in his eyes was now mixed with a trace of fear. Please. Xiao Hua raised his hand and gestured. The old stone giant hurriedly nodded and called out, Namo Mithreya Buddha, as his figure disappeared into the magma lake. Xiao Hua followed the old stone giant into the magma lake and went deeper into the magma lake. Just as Xiao Hua had seen with his divine sense, there were many stone giants in the magma lake. Some stone giants were leisurely walking in the magma lake. When they saw the old stone giant, they respectfully saluted him. Some stone giants had their eyes tightly closed, as if they were sleeping in the magma lake. Even more stone giants were moving up and down the magma lake, looking very busy as if they were looking for something. After traveling for half the time it took to eat a meal, the entire bottom of the magma lake began to slowly shrink. In the end, it shrank into an oval-shaped hole that was more than 10 li in size. Below the hole, there was more magma flowing, and it was even more scorching. Obviously, this was the core of the magma lake. Near the oval-shaped hole, there were many stone giants, but now there were few people. It seemed that even the stone giants didn't dare to get too close to the core of the magma lake. The surroundings of the cave were similarly filled with large and small ochre-red boulders. These boulders were of different shapes and looked very strange. However, the strangest thing was not these boulders, but the Buddhist shrine at the highest point of the boulder. This Buddhist shrine was neither big nor small, but when the old stone giant walked to the front of the Buddhist shrine, Xiao Hua understood that this Buddhist shrine was not even as tall as the old stone giant's knees. When the old stone giant landed in front of the Buddhist shrine, he respectfully prostrated himself on the ground, saluting according to Buddhist etiquette. His figure in front of the Buddhist shrine was especially huge, and his piety made Xiao Hua sigh. However, when Xiao Hua's gaze passed the old stone giant's figure and landed on the Buddhist statue in the Buddhist shrine, he was stunned again. How? How could it be him? Xiao Hua's heart almost jumped out of his chest. He looked at the Buddhist shrine in disbelief and couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, Namo Mithreya Buddha. Is actually Lu, -13. Chapter 4187. That's right, in that crude, stone-built Buddhist shrine, there was a fiery red Buddha statue carved out of crystal, flashing with holy Buddha light. The Buddha light shone brightly on the face of the Buddha statue. Wasn't that the lifelike Jiang Luer? Xiao Hua had once stopped Jiang Luer, whose Buddhist name was Chuanzong, from taking down the Buddhist edict in the Jiangchao temple. He had a deep impression of Jiang Luer's shaved head. Now that he saw the Buddha statue, he naturally thought of Jiang Luer. How is this possible? After Xiao Hua recovered from his shock, he muttered. What's going on? How can Zhang Luer be Nanwu Maitreya Buddha? How can his Buddha statue be in this mysterious primitive continent? Xiao Hua's suspicions were heavy, but looking at the old stone giant who had already stood up, Xiao Hua knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of this old stone giant. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and waved his hand, releasing Buddha Bodhi from his Niwen palace. Buddha Bodhi looked around in bewilderment, activating the Buddha light to block the magma outside his body. He cupped his hands and asked, Nanwa Maitreya Buddha, why didn't you ask this poor monk to come out? Xiao Hua didn't explain much. He pointed at the shrine behind Buddha Bodhi and said weakly, What's the matter? See for yourself. Why ask so much? Oh? Buddha Bodhi was even more puzzled, but when he saw the Buddha statue in the shrine, Buddha Bodhi smiled bitterly and replied, Tanyu, what else do you want this poor monk to say? Zhang Luer is the real reincarnation of Nanwu Maitreya Buddha. This poor monk is the fake. Or it could be said that this poor monk stole Zhang Luer's luck and practiced the exquisite lotus leaf sutra first. Hiss. Xiao Hua sucked in a breath of cold air. The thoughts in his mind instantly became clear. That's right. This Xiao lost his memory and wandered to the Dawn Rain continent. By a freak combination of factors, this Xiao obtained the exquisite lotus leaf pagoda. In fact, this Xiao is the intruder of the Dawn Rain continent. If this Xiao didn't lose his memory, this exquisite lotus leaf pagoda would have fallen into his hands after Zhang Luer was born. Then he, a cultivator who couldn't practice Taoist techniques, would start practicing the real Buddhist techniques. After all, he is the real reincarnation of Maitreya Buddha. Furthermore, if Tanyu hadn't come to the Dawn Rain continent, Zhang Luer would still be on the Dawn Rain continent. Although he wouldn't be able to obtain the gold leaf from the Great Snow Mountain, he would still be able to cultivate the exquisite leaf sutra, and not the current Prajna Heart Sutra. Buddha Subhuti reminded, You wouldn't have come to this fork in the road, and there wouldn't have been any sutra-seeking bliss. However, Xiao Hua was even more puzzled. He asked, if Zhang Luer is Namo Maitreya Buddha, then whose Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra is? Back on the Great Snow Mountain, didn't that old monk also say, See? At this point, Xiao Hua once again sucked in a breath of cold air, because everything that the old monk had said to him that day was equally suitable for Zhang Luer. Zhang Luer also understood the language of the Dawn Rain continent. Could it be that the old monk of the Great Snow Mountain is waiting for Zhang Luer? It's not me? Xiao Hua has a strange feeling. But if the old monk wasn't waiting for this Xiao, then the old monk shouldn't have died that day. He should still have a longer lifespan. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua seems to have thought of something. He hurriedly waved his hand and took out the pills he had obtained from the kitchen of the Great Snow Mountain. A silver-white halo flashed across his eyes. After looking at it for a moment, he said somewhat dejectedly, Not bad. This is a spirit medicine that can extend one's lifespan. One pill can extend one's lifespan by 10 years, or even more. That old monk still had a lot of it in his kitchen. He should still be alive. He mistook me for this Xiao and stopped taking it. It can be said that he was burned alive. Namo Maitreya Buddha. Buddha Subhuti sighed and said again, If this Buddha fruit belonged to someone else, it would still be snatched. But this Buddha fruit belongs to Luer. How can we snatch it? Yes, that's right. Xiao Hua nodded. Luer's sutra-seeking bliss is most likely an arrangement of the Buddhist sect to let him attain the Buddha fruit of Namo Maitreya Buddha. When we return to the hidden immortal continent, we will settle this matter. There's another question. Buddha Subhuti said again. If we snatch Luer's Buddha fruit in fate, then whose did Luer snatch? That Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, from the records of the Buddhist sect, it should be a cultivation technique cultivated by Ananda. Where is Ananda now? What is the Buddha fruit that Zhang Luer attained? It's a mess. Xiao Hua rubbed his temples in distress and said with a bitter smile, Didn't your Buddhist sect cultivate the golden body of 9 lives and control reincarnation? How did such a big accident happen today? Haven't you heard of that saying? Things that can go wrong will definitely go wrong. Or is it that things that you worry about going wrong will definitely go wrong? Buddha Subhuti answered with a smile. Although my Buddhist sect's Arhat cultivates the golden body of reincarnation, it's inevitable that there will be accidents in the process. This accident is another person's opportunity and also his own tribulation. Today's situation is Zhang Luer's tribulation and this poor monk's opportunity. That's true. Xiao Hua nodded. If nothing goes wrong, all the Buddha fruits have already been attained by the Buddha Lord and the Bodhisattvas. How can they be left for the younger generation? At this point, Xiao Hua seemed to think of something and said to Buddha Subhuti apologetically, "Fellow immortal, although this is our opportunity, but it's also Luer's tribulation. We are Luer's elders and senior sister is also very good to me, huh?" Buddha Subhuti waved his hand and said, "Namo Mithreya, you're thinking too much. Although this poor monk is an outsider, this poor monk and Sandalwood are one. Didn't Sandalwood say earlier? We are born from the same root and definitely can't cause trouble." This poor monk deeply agrees. Luer is Sandalwood's nephew, and also this poor monk's nephew. It doesn't matter if this poor monk doesn't attain the Buddha fruit or not. The key is the kinship that Sandalwood mentioned. Although this poor monk doesn't understand this kinship too well, this poor monk knows that this is the most important thing in this world to Sandalwood. This poor monk can give up the Buddha fruit for this so-called kinship. At this point, Buddha Subhuti changed the topic and said with a smile, "Moreover, Sandalwood, don't forget that this poor monk still has the Buddha fruit of Namo Great Compassion Great Guanyin Bodhisattva to attain." Good. Xiao Hua listened and said with a smile, "If fellow immortal has such a mind, there's hope for attaining the Buddha fruit in this life." Namo Mithreya. Buddha Subhuti put his palms together and chanted Buddha's name without saying anything else. When Xiao Hua and Buddha Subhuti were talking, the old stone giant didn't pay attention. First, Xiao Hua and Buddha Subhuti rarely spoke. Most of the time, it was a mental communication. Other people simply couldn't hear anything. Second, even if the old stone giant could hear, he simply couldn't understand what Xiao Hua was saying. After the old stone giant respectfully saluted, he got up and wanted to say something to Xiao Hua. However, when his single eye looked past Xiao Hua and landed on Buddha Subhuti's body, extreme shock appeared in his single eye. He opened his mouth and said, "Namo Mithreya, Namo Mithreya." One after another, he was stunned for half a cup of tea's time. Plop. The old stone giant suddenly knelt in front of Buddha Subhuti. Magma flowed out of his single eye and his mouth was sobbing. However, he still chanted the same 6 words. Buddha Bodhi sighed and lifted the old stone giant up. With a benevolent look in his eyes, he said, "Namo Mithreya Buddha. I'm not the Mithreya Buddha that you guys worship. I'm just an ordinary bodhisattva." Namo Mithreya. The old stone giant didn't care about what Buddha Subhuti said. He just used his big hand to carefully pull Buddha Subhuti's monk robe and chanted Buddha's name again and again. Although his pronunciation wasn't accurate, his incomparable devotion actually made Buddha Subhuti feel a trace of the power of faith. How is this possible? Buddha Subhuti was somewhat astonished. He looked at Xiao Hua in puzzlement. After all, he wasn't Zhang Luer, nor was he Mithreya. How could he obtain the old stone giant's faith? However, although the power of faith was particularly weak, it was real. Buddha Subhuti rarely obtained any faith in the past tens of thousands of years. Therefore, he could clearly perceive the appearance of the power of faith. Xiao Hua looked at the old stone giant's appearance and then looked at Buddha Subhuti's puzzlement. He also frowned. Normally, he would definitely encourage Buddha Subhuti to help. However, if Buddha Subhuti were to help now, it would clearly be snatching the opportunity from Zhang Luer. Not only was Buddha Subhuti hesitating, he was also hesitating. Fellow immortal. Xiao Hua's heart moved, and he said, "Previously, the human race on Shenhua continent was not prosperous. Fellow Taoist in green robes controlled the entire fortune gate by himself. Even fellow Taoist in Confucianism couldn't spread his branches and leaves. Now, the human race on this continent is flourishing. I'm afraid that there are more than 100 million of them. These humans also have the power of faith. Fellow immortal, you can spread the essence of Buddhism on Shenhua continent." Haha, Tanyu. I'm afraid that even a wise man will make a mistake. Buddha Subhuti laughed. The human race on Xinhua continent is flourishing. They can cultivate Taoism, Confucianism, and even soul cultivators can preach. This poor monk won't compete with them. This poor monk has a better place. Oh, what else is there? Xiaohua was slightly taken aback. However, it was only a moment before Xiaohua came to a sudden realization. Soon after, he bowed respectfully and said, Namo Maitreya Buddha, since fellow immortal has such a great wish, this poor Taoist will address you as master in the future. I don't dare. Buddha Subhuti said compassionately, humans are fruits, devils are fruits, beasts are fruits, and demons are also fruits. Everything in this world is a fruit in the eyes of my Buddhism sect. Tanyu has taken in so many devils, but you still haven't found a way to deal with them. Leave these devils to this poor monk. This poor monk doesn't have to compete with you fellow immortals for anything. Master is merciful. Hearing Buddha Subhuti's great wish, Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He called him master and said, I didn't think things through that day and brought great trouble to master. Namo Maitreya Buddha. This is tribulation, fate, cause, and effect. Buddha Subhuti nodded slightly. He then looked at the old stone giant who was carefully looking at him. The lava in the stone giant's eye had already flowed to his chest. -13. Chapter 4188. Buddha Bodhi pondered for a moment and continued. Although this poor monk is not Zhang, this poor monk is Namo Maitreya in front of the old stone giant. In his eyes, there is no difference between a bodhisattva and a Buddha Lord. Just like Tanyu in the hidden immortal continent, although Tanyu used the name of compassionate travel and the image of compassionate bodhisattva, the strength of faith is gathered on Namo Maitreya merciful bodhisattva. Even if this poor monk does good deeds now, the strength of faith will fall on Namo Maitreya Buddha. When you and I return to the hidden immortal continent, this poor monk will give up this good karma and give it to Zhang. Won't this karma end? It seems to be different. Xiaohua shook his head slightly, disagreeing. As for why, he himself was not clear. Buddha Bodhi looked at the old stone giant and then raised his head to look at the magma. As if he was aware of the movement here, he slowly turned to the stone giants gathered here and said only one sentence. If the Buddha fruit is this poor monk's, other bodhisattvas will want to help these devout believers, even if they get this merit. Then this poor monk will absolutely not resent them, and also absolutely do not want this merit. This poor monk would rather these devout believers keep their faith in my Buddhist kingdom. If you think it's right, then do it. Xiaohua already understood what Buddha Bodhi wanted to do. He nodded, that Zhang, who took down the Buddha list and embarked on the path of sutra-seeking in nirvana, is definitely not that kind of petty bodhisattva. Namo Maitreya Buddha. Bodhi Buddha chanted the name of Buddha and pointed at the old stone giant's forehead with his slender finger, saying, with my life, I call upon the supreme mercy of Buddha, dispel the ignorance of the world, wash away the stubbornness of the mortal world, gain the wisdom of 100 monks, and open the true words of the light of Buddha. Namo Maitreya Buddha. Namo Maitreya Buddha. As Buddha Bodhi's finger fell, numerous phantoms appeared in the magma nearby. Tens of thousands of Buddhas appeared in the phantoms, and chants of Buddha came from the small worlds. When Buddha Bodhi's finger touched the stone giant's forehead, a cluster of spirit light appeared from the stone giant's forehead. It was so simple yet so bright. Even someone as strong as Xiaohua felt his vision blur. Countless images appeared and instantly disappeared in the spirit light. Tens of thousands of scriptures appeared and instantly disappeared in the spirit light. Crack! At this moment, in the shrine not far away, the forehead of the Namo Maitreya Buddha carved with crimson crystal split open, and a scar visible to the naked eye divided Zhang face into two halves. Xiaohua was shocked and unconsciously said, Good, good. In a moment, the spirit light converged on the stone giant's forehead, and a trace of clarity flashed in the stone giant's eyes. Buddha Bodhi withdrew his flower-pinching finger, and the light of Buddha around him dimmed a little. His face was neither happy nor sad as he said, Old man, do you understand? Namo Maitreya Buddha. The old stone giant's face was filled with surprise, and he immediately responded. However, That was all, and he didn't say anything else. Xiaohua was taken aback. He was quite puzzled in his heart because the Buddhist Dharma was boundless. Most of the time, the Buddhist Dharma that Buddha Subhuti knew was even more powerful than his own Tao Dharma. Since Buddha Subhuti was using this Buddhist Dharma at this moment, then he must be confident. Buddha Bodhi wasn't surprised. He just closed his eyes for a moment, and then he opened them and said with a smile, "Old man, you should be able to understand this poor monk's words, but you can't say it because you don't know how to say it, and you don't know how to write it." Namo Maitreya Buddha. The old stone giant nodded and put his palms together. Good. Buddha Bodhi nodded slightly and said again, "Old man, if you think this Dharma is useful, you can bring your people here, and this Dharma is willing to use it on them one by one. What do you think?" "Master, are you crazy?" Without waiting for the old stone giant to speak, Xiaohua anxiously pointed at the Buddha statue in the shrine and whispered, "This Dharma can only be used by a Buddha Lord who has Buddha fruit. It's fine if Master uses the power of faith of Buddha Maitreya to use it once, but if you use it one by one, the consequences will be unimaginable." Namo Maitreya Buddha. If I don't go to hell, who will? Buddha Bodhi glanced at the Buddha statue and said, "This Dharma will only use this Dharma. This Dharma will bear all the consequences, and I'm willing to give all the merit to Namo Maitreya Buddha." Namo Maitreya Buddha. At this moment, the old stone giant replied and respectfully invited Buddha Bodhi to take a seat. He walked into the magma and patted the magma with his hand. He chanted Buddha's name again, and the stone giants walked out of the magma. Xiaohua looked at the old stone giant gathering his people, and then at the Buddha statue in the shrine. At this moment, the cracks were getting deeper, and there was even some red liquid seeping out, just like the blood on the body. Xiaohua's heart thumped, and he whispered, "Master, perhaps I was wrong. Master is borrowing the power of Namo Maitreya Buddha to use Dharma. Maybe you're robbing Zhang Luer's opportunity." Buddha Bodhi's eyebrows twitched slightly, and he lowered his head and said, "Namo Maitreya Buddha. This Dharma has said that it's fate and tribulation. If this Dharma wants to help these stone giants survive, this Dharma can't be considered one by one. Actually, you don't have to do this." Xiaohua smiled and said, "What the stone giants need are fire-type primordial stones. Although there are no ready-made ones in the magma, as long as they master the method to absorb fire-type primordial chi, wouldn't it have the same effect as taking fire-type primordial stones? I only need to use Dharma to let them know how to cultivate. I'm afraid things aren't as simple as you think." Buddha Bodhi glanced at the damaged Buddha statue in the shrine and said, "Since there's a Buddha statue of Namo Maitreya Buddha here, it's impossible for it to appear out of thin air. Presumably, Luer must have been here in his previous life. If Luer can come here, then his Dharma cultivation is definitely more profound than this Dharma. If even he can enlighten these stone giants, how can this Dharma do it? How can Dharma do it?" Sigh. Xiaohua had always relied on Taoism's divine abilities, and his thoughts were similar to those of Taoism's experts. He felt that everything could be solved by Taoism's divine abilities. Now that he heard Buddha Bodhi's words, it was as if he was enlightened. He sucked in a breath of cold air and said with some sincerity, "I was wrong. Enlightening these stone giants can't rely on Dharma or Taoism for a moment, but the power of time and a tenacious heart. Only when one accumulates 1,000 miles can it be effective." Namo Maitreya Buddha. That's exactly it. Buddha Bodhi nodded. Although we Buddhists don't teach secular people, and are somewhat different from Confucian cultivators, we have the same effect in praising the Dharma. As he said that, Buddha Bodhi glanced at the Buddha statue again and said, "Luer might have known this in his previous life, but why didn't he do it? Was it because he didn't have enough time, or was it because he didn't have the right opportunity? This is hard to figure out. It's probably because there was an opportunity to leave this continent, and he didn't have time to do these things, so he left his Buddha statue behind to teach the stone giants." Xiaohua smiled. Unfortunately, this enlightenment took a wrong path, and only let the stone giants understand the 6 words Namo Maitreya Buddha. Let this little monk walk this unfinished path for him. Buddha Bodhi also smiled and said, "It's a pity that this little monk came in a hurry and didn't transform into Luer's appearance. Form isn't emptiness, emptiness isn't form. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Grandmaster, you're a little stubborn. Xiaohua smiled. Although the old stone giant couldn't communicate with Xiaohua and the others, now that he had obtained the root of wisdom, his mind was clear and bright. His command of the stone giant tribe was different from before. He spoke less of the name Namo Maitreya Buddha, and his movements were orderly. Not long after, the tribe members who were slightly closer to the shrine had already lined up and waited in the magma. Those stone giants who had previously taken the primordial stones also walked over and placed the primordial stones beside the old stone giant. The old stone giant looked at the stone giants, then raised his hand slightly and turned to Buddha Bodhi. Buddha Bodhi understood and stepped on a Buddhist lotus to the top of the shrine. The old stone giant put his palms together and said, Namo Maitreya Buddha. The stone giants called out Namo, Namo Maitreya, or Namo Maitreya, and worshipped with incomparable devotion. When the stone giants straightened up, Buddha Bodhi held a flower with both hands, and it turned into 1,000 arms that fell on the stone giants' foreheads. Seeing that the magma was filled with spiritual light and countless primal stones, the stone giant's eyes flashed with clarity. When Buddha Bodhi withdrew the Buddhist light, his body trembled slightly, and the stone giant said, Namo Maitreya Buddha. Good. Buddha Bodhi's eyes narrowed, and his gaze was filled with compassion as he said. Then, Buddha Bodhi sat cross-legged on the lotus, closed his eyes, and chanted Buddhist scriptures. After the stone giants bowed and saluted the old stone giant, they took their own primordial stones and left through the magma. They didn't stop for long. Xiaohua stood at the side and didn't look carefully. He only occasionally looked at the Buddha statue in the shrine. The cracks on the statue were getting bigger and deeper, and an unfathomable expression appeared on his face. After a few days, the stone giants were all enlightened by Buddha Bodhi. Xiaohua looked around and found that there were actually close to 10,000 stone giants living in this several hundred li wide magma. It was no wonder that the fire-type primal stones in the magma were all dug out, and not a single one could be found. After a few days, Buddha Bodhi began to teach the stone giants simple Buddhist scriptures. However, after a few tries, he gave up and followed Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's suggestion to start from the very beginning. After another half a day, seeing that Buddha Bodhi was too busy, Xiaohua simply took out his remaining disciples from the space and had them teach the 10,000 stone giants how to recognize and pronounce words. Of course, the language that Xiaohua and Buddha Bodhi chose was the human language of the ruins. -13. Chapter 4189. Looking at the huge stone giants sitting in the magma and learning from Fujiwen and the others, Xiaohua suddenly had a familiar feeling. It was as if he had returned to the time when he was struggling to learn. However, at the same time, Xiaohua was a little worried in his heart. The Buddha statue in the shrine had almost been broken into two halves. The crack from the top cut across the heart of the Buddha statue and went all the way to the lower body. Crimson liquid flowed like a candle's tears onto the 9 lotus platforms below the Buddha statue. If it weren't for the 9 lotus platforms protecting the Buddha statue, the entire Buddha statue would have been completely split apart. Dragon Vein Xiaohua and Phoenix Body Xiaohua did not return. Xiaohua also did not receive any messages from them. However, Xiaohua was not alarmed. Presumably, even if the two clones encountered any danger, their lives would not be in danger. On this day, the entire magma lake was producing rhythmic sounds of reading. Xiaohua, who was sitting cross-legged, suddenly frowned and looked outside the magma lake with some surprise. Rumble. A slight tremor came from the ground. Even though the magma had already offset a lot of the tremor, it could still be heard under the magma. The old stone giant who was struggling to pronounce the words immediately stood up from the ground and called out very fluently, Namo Maitreya Buddha, Namo Maitreya Buddha. In a moment, all the stone giants who were learning how to pronounce the words stood up and shouted loudly. A fighting spirit emerged from these stone giants. Enemy! Enemy! The old stone giant only now remembered that Buddha Bodhi was beside him. He hastily pointed above and stammered, Go! Buddha Bodhi nodded and waved his hand to give an order. Then, The old stone giant called out, Namo Maitreya Buddha, and orderly arranged a group of stone giants to rush out of the underground space from various parts of the magma lake. We will also go out and take a look. It seems like something interesting has happened. Xiao Hua smiled and said to Buddha Bodhi and Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua and the other clones, "This little monk has the same intention." Buddha Bodhi nodded and stood up on his Buddhist lotus. Xiao Hua, however, shook his head. "Fellow Taoists, let's go. I have been dizzy from these rocks for the past few days. I still want to take a look at the magma and refine my wood origin." "All right, go ahead, fellow Taoist. Just be careful." When Xiao Hua first saw the Buddhist shrine, he had already clearly seen the bottom of the magma. There was a completely different world under that oval-shaped hole. There were even a few places inside that Xiao Hua's divine sense couldn't penetrate. The stone giant couldn't enter, so he naturally didn't know. Xiao Hua had been concentrating on teaching the stone giant for the past few days, so he didn't have the mood to explore. Now that he heard that the bone-honing Xiao Hua wanted to go, he naturally reminded him. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist." Bone-honing Xiao Hua laughed. "I know what I'm doing." When the bone-honing Xiao Hua's figure fell into the hole, Xiao Hua led the group of disciples and his avatar out of the magma lake. When Xiao Hua escaped out of the ground, he was met with a dense aura of desolation. That viscous heaven and earth origin energy made him unable to help but take a deep breath. When his whole body felt comfortable, he couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Damn it, this group of stone men. There was clearly heaven and earth origin energy around them that could save their lives. Yet they insisted on looking for origin stones. If they hadn't met me, I'm afraid they would have starved to death while hugging the gold mountain. Fellow Taoists' thinking is too simple. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua laughed. These stone men originally had stone brains. Other than knowing how to find origin stones, they don't know anything else. If ordinary people want to cultivate Taoist techniques, they also have to rely on luck. If their aptitude is slightly lacking, they won't be able to sense heaven and earth origin energy. You want these stone men who don't know how to speak and don't know how to cultivate to learn Taoist techniques? That's really difficult. AI, indeed. Xiao Hua nodded. I don't remember much about my childhood, but I still have some impressions. I's path of seeking Tao when I was young was very tortuous. Even since I had memories of hidden immortal continent, I's path of cultivation wasn't smooth. In short, what Master wants to do is extremely difficult. Fu Jiwen, who was standing respectfully at the side, heard this and echoed. However, if it can really be done, the merit of teaching is really enough for Master to use. Jiwen is right. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua agreed. Which one of us Confucian cultivators didn't have the merit of teaching? Confucius, Mencius. Each and every one of them has a merit as vast as the Milky Way. Haha. Hearing this, Xiao Hua suddenly laughed. He patted his head and said, I was fooled by the little monk. Damn it, Lu Er's cultivation in his previous life was indeed deeper than mine. But what he can't do, it doesn't mean that we can't do it. It's impossible to travel 1,000 miles without taking a few steps, but if we have a direction, we can naturally reach it with the help of flying equipment. Oh, ha ha ha. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. After a moment, he also came to his senses. He looked at Buddha Bodhi and said with a smile, yes, it's really like this. We have a heaven-defying space. Why can't we use it? Xiao Hua and the others landed on a nearby mountain ridge. As they spoke, groups of stone giants also walked out from various places on the vermilion ground. At this time, between the mountains, a large number of stone giants appeared out of nowhere. These stone giants lined up, holding some strange stone tools in their hands. They neatly encircled the entire plain. It was this orderly pace that alarmed the old stone giant under the magma. Xiao Hua's divine sense swept over these stone giants, and he couldn't help but frown. Except for the stone tools in their hands, these attacking stone giants didn't look any different from the stone giants in the magma. Namo Maitreya Buddha. Just as Xiao Hua was puzzled, the stone giants that came out of the magma had already formed a formation. Moreover, this formation didn't look much inferior to the stone giants that surrounded them. Following the old stone giant's roar, All the stone giants waved their fists and rushed towards the besieged stone giants. In just a moment, a tragic scene appeared in front of Xiao Hua and the others. Whether it was the attacking stone giants or the defending stone giants, they all began to be injured. Some had lost arms, some had broken legs, and some had even lost half of their heads. However, no matter how injured they were, the two sides of the stone giants didn't shrink back. They attacked with all their might, trying their best to kill the other side in their own hands. Xiao Hua and the other clones, as well as many disciples, stayed on top of the mountain peak to watch, but they didn't make a move. Of course, based on the current battle situation, not to mention Xiao Hua, even Fu Jiwen and the other disciples could definitely kill the invading stone giants. However, Fu Jiwen and the others couldn't make a move because they didn't understand why these stone giants were attacking the stone giants in the magma. Strange. Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua looked at the two sides that were in a stalemate and asked in a low voice, "All wars in the world have a cause. On the surface, the great war of the Tao of the Ruins was for the billions of wandering souls, but in secret, it was for the origin of wood and even for the formation of the demonic spirit. Why are these two stone giants here? For the fire attribute primordial stones? There are no primordial stones in the magma, so it's impossible for these stone giants to not know. What if it's to kill the other side? These two sides are both stone giants, so there's no reason for them to naturally counter each other." "Martial uncles," Jiang Hong said in a low voice from the side, "these invading stone giants, they're not shouting Namo Maitreya Buddha, but it seems to be dragon language." Dragon language? Xiao Hua was startled and immediately listened carefully. Sure enough, the attacking stone giants seemed to be vaguely shouting, "Long live the dragon god! Long live the dragon god!" which was exactly opposite to the Namo Maitreya Buddha that the magma stone giants were shouting. Damn it, there's something strange. Xiao Hua patted his forehead, somewhat vexed. Could it be that these stone giants aren't here for the primordial stones? Could it be that they're here for the so-called faith? Could it be that on this mysterious continent, other than Namo Maitreya Buddha, there's another dragon god? "Master, take a closer look." Jiang Hong looked carefully at the side and said, "Those stone giants shouting, 'Dragon God,' seem to have some dragon markings on their bodies. But these dragon markings are extremely few, only half a trace or a trace." "Correct. That's exactly the case." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and nodded. "Previously, I couldn't see clearly, but now that they're shouting, 'Long live the dragon god,' and fighting with the magma stone giants, I can see clearly. Not only that, these magma stone giants also have an extremely faint, swastika character on their bodies. Don't you think so, Master Subhoodie?" Namo Maitreya Buddha. How could Buddha Subhoodie not see this? His eyes were filled with compassion, and he chanted the name of Buddha. Although the stone giants weren't humans, they were still alive, and in this kind of slaughter, it was inevitable that there would be casualties. "Green-robed fellow Taoist," Xiao Hua instructed, "use a thunderous method to make these stone giants stop fighting. I really don't understand why they're fighting." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you're confused. Green-robed fellow Taoist and soul cultivator fellow Taoist are building a transfer array. They're not here." "Then I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Confucian cultivator." Xiao Hua was truly somewhat anxious and said impatiently, "Make them quickly stop this senseless slaughter." This young one understands." Confucian cultivator Xiao Hua naturally understood what Xiao Hua was thinking. He waved his hand, and tens of millions of 5-chi righteous thunders appeared out of thin air. With a rumbling sound, they struck down, scaring all the stone giants into a daze on the spot. "Namo Maitreya Buddha." The magma stone giants took the lead to shout, and each of them covered their heads and fled towards the entrance of the magma. The attacking stone giants were no exception, and after only holding on for a few breaths, they also fled in panic. Jiang Hong, seeing the stone giants run away, Xiao Hua instructed, "Transform into your figure, and follow these stone giants to see what's going on." "Yes, disciple understands." Jiang Hong's body surged with dragon markings, and her figure immediately flew up. -13. Chapter 4190. Fellow Taoist, you go accompany Jiang Hong. Xiao Hua thought for a moment and ordered, "Don't let anything happen to Jiang Hong." Good. Xiao Hua didn't refuse. His figure flickered, and he followed Jiang Hong to chase after the stone giants. Then, Xiao Hua looked at the messy plains. At this time, there were many broken limbs on the ground. They were thrown there like stones. There was no stone giant to take these broken limbs away. AI, why is there a war everywhere? Xiao Hua sighed and waved his hand, leading many disciples to escape into the magma. The old stone giant couldn't speak, so he couldn't tell Xiao Hua what happened. Xiao Hua also didn't force him. He waited for the stone giants to rest for half a day. Then he had the stone giants form a formation. He took out the Kunlun mirror from his bosom, and with the command of Buddha Bodhi, he sent all the stone giants into the space under the urging of his magic power. Because of their belief in Buddha Bodhi, these stone giants were easily sent into the space. Moreover, inside the space, Jade Archive Xiao Hua had already created an illusion of a magma lake for them. Many stone giants entered the space without any rejection, just like the magma lake that extended out of the mysterious continent. In his own space, Jade Archive Xiao Hua could do whatever he wanted. First, he waved his hands and sent countless soul threads into the foreheads of these stone giants like lightning bolts. He taught these stone giants ordinary cultivation methods, and then after a little thought, he sent some ancient books of Confucian cultivators and some essences of Buddhist sects into their minds. Xiao Hua even created tens of thousands of Buddha Bodhi to teach these stone giants how to speak. This was the idea that Xiao Hua had previously thought of. Zhang Luer's previous life might have been more powerful than Xiao Hua's current cultivation, but he didn't have the space, so he didn't have the ability to control space. As for Xiao Hua, although he was not omnipotent in this space, teaching these stone giants how to speak and decipher words was still quite easy. Jade Archive Xiao Hua's ability to teach was hard to say, but his method of imparting Dao magic was indeed first class. After receiving Jade Archive Xiao Hua's teachings, all the stone giants closed their eyes and meditated, seemingly gaining something. After a few days, although these stone giants couldn't really speak, they were forced to speak by their experiences. After another dozen or so days, all of the stone giants could clearly express their thoughts. Therefore, Xiao Hua struck while the iron was hot and sent them out of the space. He also had Fu Jiwen and the other disciples give them instructions. On one hand, he explained the cultivation technique, and on the other hand, he was familiar with the language. It was truly beyond Buddha Bodhi's expectations. Xiao Hua's actions were extremely effective. In the span of a dozen days, the stone giants in the magma lake seemed to have been reborn. Learning to read and write was the most basic. Many of the stone giants had already begun to discuss the essence of cultivation. In particular, most of the stone giants were devout and interested in the Buddhist scriptures. They all sat cross-legged around Buddha Bodhi and listened to him talk about the scriptures. At this point, Xiao Hua finally understood the ins and outs of the situation. The magma stone giants had begun to worship Namo Maitreya the moment they formed their own race. The Buddha statue in the shrine had always been there for them to worship. Of course, they didn't know where the shrine came from or who it was worshipping. They only knew how to say Namo Maitreya the Buddha. Moreover, each stone giant was different, so they didn't know the full story. The stone giants in the magma lake lived on fire attribute source stones. Normally, they would look for source stones to fill their stomachs in the magma lake. However, in the past few decades, it was unknown whether it was because the stone giants were reproducing too quickly or because the number of fire attribute source stones had decreased, but the number of source stones they could find had decreased. If it weren't for the fact that they had accumulated some source stones in the past few years, some of the stone giants might have starved to death. As for the invading stone giants, they also lived in the magma lake. They were hundreds of miles away from each other. The living environment of the stone giants was similar to the living environment of this group of stone giants. Long ago, the two groups of stone giants had fought and killed each other, but the scale was not large. But recently, because the source stones had decreased, the number of fights had increased. Almost every dozen or so days, there would be a fight. There were even 4 or 5 stone giants gathered around the magma lake. These stone giants also fought with each other. The stone giants in front of Xiaohua believed in Namomaithreya, the Buddha, and weren't particularly aggressive. The stone giants that believed in the dragon god weren't so easy to talk to. Not only did they attack this group of stone giants, they also attacked other stone giants. In addition to the fighting between the stone giants, there were other races entrenched around the magma lake. The golden-armored dwarf and strange bird that Xiaohua had seen before were all of them. However, because the stone giants had just learned how to express themselves, they couldn't speak clearly. Moreover, these races were similar to the stone giants. They all lived in strange places. If ordinary divine senses didn't carefully investigate, they wouldn't be discovered. These races were similar in strength to the stone giants. Although they had some conflicts with the stone giants, as long as they didn't invade the other party's territory in batches, it wouldn't cause a war between the two sides. As for that night, when the stone giants went to rescue the younger stone giants, they passed through the borders of the golden-armored dwarf and strange bird's territory and were attacked by the two. The stone giants generally moved around in the magma lake and rarely went to the surface. Therefore, the stone giants only knew about the situation within 1,000 miles. They didn't know much about the situation beyond that. Even so, Xiaohua learned from the stone giants that there was a powerful prehistoric strange beast several thousand miles away. After hearing the old stone giant explain the general situation with a stutter, Xiaohua nodded with a smile. He looked at the scholarly cultivator Xiaohua and said, "Fellow immortal, what the stone giants said is correct. However, they haven't walked on the surface for a long time. The information might be wrong. Or perhaps, the primeval beasts in their eyes might not be able to enter our eyes." When the prehistoric secret treasure appeared that day, the closest aura was at least several 100,000 miles away from here. It's unlikely that it's the one that the stone giants spoke of. It shouldn't be. Scholarly cultivator Xiaohua agreed. Those who dare to reveal their aura when the prehistoric secret treasure appears are all experts of this continent. For the stone giants to know about it, I'm afraid it's not particularly strong. Unfortunately, although the stone giants look tall, they actually have timid hearts. The range of their activities is really limited, and they don't know much. They can't give us a general understanding of the entire continent. Xiaohua said with some regret. Scholarly cultivator Xiaohua nodded and said, "That's right. If that little guy wasn't really hungry and didn't know about the nearby dangers after seeing fellow Taoist fall into the distant mountain peak, he wouldn't have rashly gone to look for you. Otherwise, we wouldn't have found this place." Xiaohua looked at the Buddha statue that had been completely split into 2 halves on the shrine and replied somewhat absent-mindedly, "Yes, this might be fate." As he said this, Xiaohua's gaze passed over the Buddha statue and looked at Buddha Bodhi, who was teaching the stone giants Buddhist doctrine. A faint knock quietly emerged in his heart. "Fellow Taoist." At this moment, the bone-honing Xiaohua called out to Xiaohua, "Come down and take a look. This place is a bit strange." "Oh?" Xiaohua was taken aback. He had already used his divine sense to explore the magma lake where the stone giants lived. However, it was just a magma lake that led underground, and there was nothing special about it. Of course, Xiaohua had only taken a rough look. The deeper he went into the magma lake, the more divine sense he could sense. Moreover, it was harmful to his divine sense, so Xiaohua did not seriously explore the magma lake. However, he didn't expect there to be something strange under the magma lake. Xiaohua and scholarly cultivator Xiaohua exchanged a glance. Their figures flickered as they flew into the hole. Both of them were very powerful, so they did not attract the attention of the Fortune Gate's disciples or even the stone giants. Below the hole was a passage several li wide. The walls of the passage were made of solid rock, and the magma lake emitted a dark red hue when it hit the rocks. There was nothing interesting to see inside the passage. Xiaohua's divine sense swept over the passage and continued to fly down. After traveling for more than 100 miles, the temperature in the vicinity had reached an extremely high level. The previously dark red magma had already begun to emit a bright red color. Faint ripples were also being produced within the magma, flying into the distorted void due to the burning of the magma. If I'm not mistaken, This mainland should still be the upper realm. Xiao Hua looked at his protective barrier, which was shaking under the high temperature of the magma lake, and said decisively, I remember when I was in the flame forest swamp, I also went deep into the magma lake. Although it wasn't this deep, the magma wasn't even half as hot as here. This kind of heat is not something the cultivation world can withstand. And scholarly cultivator Xiao Hua nodded. There is a faint trace of Xiantian true qi in the magma lake. This Xiao Sheng has absorbed it. This kind of Xiantian true qi almost doesn't exist on the hidden immortal mainland. As the two of them spoke, they flew for several li and reached the end of the passage. After exiting the passage, they arrived at a huge space filled with bright red liquid. This liquid was much more delicate than the magma lake, and there were thumb-sized crystal stones floating around. These were fire attribute source stones. However, Xiao Hua's divine sense did not linger on these source stones for long. Instead, he looked at the center of the space. In the center of the space, there was a huge stone pillar that extended straight from the bottom of the magma lake into the space. The top of this stone pillar looked quite flat, and it was several mu in size. At this moment, bone-honing Xiao Hua was standing on top of it, looking at the pile of bones in front of him in a daze. The bones were very thick and large, almost occupying the top of the several mu in size stone pillar. Fellow Taoist, bone-honing Xiao Hua did not turn his head and said, Quickly come and take a look at these bones. They are really strange. Xiao Hua flew close to the stone pillar, but he did not look at the bones first. Instead, he looked around with his divine sense, and then asked curiously, Fellow Taoist, how did you come here? The fire attribute source energy of heaven and earth here is too rich. It's not good for you to refine the origin of wood. -13. Chapter 4191. Hee. Bone-honing Xiao Hua turned his head and looked at Xiao Hua with a smile. I started to cultivate near the passage, but after a while, I suddenly felt that these stone giants were very pitiful. They were starving to death while guarding this magma. So I simply went to the depths of the magma to see if I could find some primordial stones for them. In the end, I found the primordial stones, and I also found these bones. Oh. Xiao Hua was startled and looked at bone-honing Xiao Hua with some astonishment. He even sized him up a few times. Bone-honing Xiao Hua was somewhat puzzled and asked curiously, What's wrong? Fellow Taoist, is there something wrong with I? Xiao Hua had a smile on his face and asked, This feeling, when did it start? What feeling? Bone-honing Xiao Hua was stunned and asked back, I just feel that those stone giants are pitiful. Xiao Hua replied, Just now. Bone-honing Xiao Hua was really at a loss. Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Xiao Hua cupped his hands and said, Fellow Taoist, you have a sympathetic heart. You are not far from becoming a real person. Hee, is that so? Bone-honing Xiao Hua touched his bald head in embarrassment and replied embarrassedly. Xiao Hua asked with interest, If I let fellow Taoist control the celestial white bones again, how confident would fellow Taoist be? Bone-honing Xiao Hua pondered a little and seemed to understand something. He nodded and said, I don't have much confidence now, but I seem to have confidence. I dare to control the celestial white bones. Good. Xiao Hua clapped and said with a smile, I had been thinking about how to use the Tao sect's secret technique to control the celestial white bones. I even thought about using the secret technique of sacrificial refining to refine the celestial white bones. Moreover, to be honest with you two fellow Taoists, I have already let green-robed Xiao Hua look at the cultivation methods I obtained from the ruins. I want to find the method to suppress the celestial white bones. However, according to fellow Taoist tempered bones, if we want to control the Deva bones, we can't do it from the outside. That's an inferior method. We should use superior methods to control the Deva bones from the inside out. Xiao Hua, the Confucian cultivator, had been studying the classics of Confucianism ever since he was born. He had a lot of experience in thinking, so he had a good understanding of these seemingly profound things. He said, Fellow immortal, you mean, to let fellow immortal tempered bones develop human emotions, and use these emotions to influence the wisp of consciousness inside the celestial bones and finally assimilate it? That's right. That's exactly it. Xiaohua nodded. The thing that controls the celestial white bones is that triangular blood bone. The strand of consciousness within this blood bone is extremely strong and tyrannical. Just refining this consciousness alone would take thousands or even tens of thousands of years. I even felt that there would be a risk of backlash. Moreover, if I sacrificially refine this consciousness, there would be a barrier between the consciousness and the white bones, and it would be difficult to achieve perfect control. Only by slowly assimilating would it be possible to firmly control the celestial white bones. Speaking up to here, Xiaohua smiled again. He looked at the white bones on the stone pillar and said, "Of course, these are just some of I's guesses. Fellow Taoist tempered bones has to try to know. Let's not talk about the celestial white bones anymore. Fellow Taoist tempered bones, is there anything strange about these white bones?" "Oh, it's like this." Xiaohua raised his hand and held a white bone that was several feet thick in his hand. He pointed at the white bone and said, "When I came here, before I even saw those primordial stones, I sensed the power of lightning within this white bone. This power of lightning is somewhat similar to that of the celestial white bones. I thought that I had found a new celestial white bone, but when I picked up this white bone, I discovered that the power of lightning within this white bone had entered I's body and disappeared. The white bone no longer had the power of lightning. Moreover, it was also different from the celestial white bones. Although the celestial white bones were fragmented, there was a kind of vague and exuberant vitality inside. That vitality seemed to be indestructible. And these white bones are the same as ordinary white bones. They seem to be completely dead." Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at these white bones, he said, "Isn't it normal for white bones to be completely dead? Celestial white bones that have vitality are actually abnormal. Fellow Taoist, don't forget that this is the mysterious continent, the upper realm." Xiaohua said in all seriousness, "Whether these white bones belong to prehistoric beasts or celestials, there should be vitality within the white bones. They shouldn't be completely dead." "But aren't these white bones dead?" Xiaohua took the white bones and scanned them with his divine sense. Then, he handed them to Xiaohua. Xiaohua cultivated life energy, so he was naturally more sensitive to vitality. When he took the white bones, he already sensed it. "So, the origin of these white bones is a bit strange," Xiaohua asserted. "They must have died under an incomparably powerful lightning strike. A fatal strike?" "Perhaps," Xiaohua replied. His divine sense scanned the pile of white bones again. Suddenly, a strange expression appeared on his face. He said, however, "These dead white bones are also useful to us." "Oh? What can they be used for?" Xiaohua was greatly puzzled. He asked curiously, "Could it be that fellow Taoist can use these white bones to make another celestial?" Xiaohua looked at Xiaohua unhappily. "You only know how to make a celestial. Don't forget, we have the Million Ming Mountains nether passage mirror in our hands. Although your soul tool has been repaired by fellow Taoist soul cultivator, it can't be perfect." Fellow Taoist Greenrobe also obtained a lot of white bones in the spring-penetrating Forbidden Sea. Compared to these white bones, I'm afraid the difference is like heaven and earth, right? "Haha, that's great." Xiaohua clapped and said, "With these white bones, fellow Taoist soul cultivator can also refine other soul tools." "Exactly." Xiaohua released his divine sense and collected these white bones. He said with a smile, "It's not easy to come to the upper realm. Why don't we fish for more benefits? Everything in the prehistoric realm is useful to us." "Haha, of course, not to mention these white bones. Even these crystals look several times better than those in the hidden immortal continent." Xiaohua laughed. He opened his mouth and spat out a beam of light, which turned into thousands of light threads and fell into the magma. When the beam of light flew back, each light thread carried a crystal. "Here." Xiaohua took the crystal and didn't keep it. Instead, he put it in his spatial ring and handed it to Xiaohua. He said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, give it to the stone giants. If it weren't for fellow Taoist's opportunity, we wouldn't know there were crystals here." Thank you, fellow Taoist. Xiaohua grinned and reached out to take it. He said, I hope the stone giants can learn the cultivation method fellow Taoist taught them before they use up all these crystals. They don't need to be proficient in anything, as long as they don't starve. Don't worry, Xiaohua replied with a smile. Although these stone giants have just been enlightened, they are creatures from the upper realm and are born with innate spirituality. Perhaps they can't cultivate all the cultivation methods we taught them, but refining energy into essence is not a problem. That's Xiaohua continued, fellow Taoist used Taoist magic as a foundation, borrowed from the demon race's cultivation method, and even used my Confucian secret technique as a guide to tailor the cultivation method for the stone giants. If it's not easy to use, what other cultivation method in this world can be used? You flatter me. You flatter me. Xiaohua waved his hand and said to Xiaohua, fellow Taoist, go deliver the crystals first, and then seize the time to cultivate. We will only be here for 100 years. If there are any changes in the future, we will have to rely on fellow Taoist strength. Yes, I know, Xiaohua said and urged his figure to go up the passage. Looking at Xiaohua's back, Xiaohua said with gratification, I really didn't expect that this fellow Taoist who calls himself a celestial would also start to have the emotions of a mortal. Yes, the inheritance of Confucian cultivators is indeed no small matter. Not to mention the human race's inheritance in the 4 books and 5 scriptures. Even the words used for children's enlightenment can make stubborn people develop spiritual wisdom. Xiaohua also sighed, and there was a faint sense of pride in his words. In this aspect, Taoist magic is slightly lacking. Developing spiritual wisdom might have some effect on the human race, but it definitely won't work on strange creatures like the stone giants. Xiaohua nodded and looked into the distance. There seems to be something strange over there. Fellow Taoist, will you follow I there? I won't go. Xiaohua shook his head. I also have something to do. Oh, what is it? Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. This mysterious continent has the same righteous aura as the ruins, but this righteous aura doesn't have the aura of the human race. The stone giants have already been enlightened. I want to comprehend the changes in the righteous aura, which will be of great help to my cultivation. That's right. Xiaohua clapped his hands and said, fellow Taoist cultivates the Confucian Tao in the hidden immortal continent. No matter what, you can only comprehend it from the source. Now that you have the chance to see the source, it's an opportunity to see something from nothing. I also congratulate fellow Taoist. Hee, congratulations to you too. Xiaohua smiled mysteriously, cupped his hands, and left. Seeing that the bone-tempering Xiaohua and Xiaohua were both busy, Xiaohua was very happy. He turned around and flew to another place in the space. Just now, when Xiaohua used his divine sense to explore, he already discovered that there was a similar passage in this place. Xiaohua's 5 elements escape technique had already been cultivated to the extreme. Although he was inside the magma, the distance of several hundred li was only a moment. However, after Xiaohua flew to the bottom of the passage, he didn't rush in. Instead, he looked further into the magma with a trace of doubt on his face. He saw that there was also a several mu large stone pillar standing out from the bottom of the magma. Moreover, there was also a pile of white bones on top of the stone pillar. Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. He used his divine sense to explore the surroundings for a moment. Seeing that there was nothing strange, he flew over again. After landing on the stone pillar, Xiaohua picked up one of the white bones and examined it carefully. This white bone was different from the one Xiaohua saw before. It was slightly thinner and shorter. Moreover, it only covered half of the stone pillar. There was no lightning power on the white bone. Instead, there were extremely small holes that pierced through the white bone. These holes were densely packed and countless. If it was an ordinary bone, it would have been shattered long ago. However, when Xiaohua used his finger to flick it a few times, the white bone actually produced a metallic sound. It seemed to be very hard. -13. Chapter 4192. Could it be that these stone pillars are some kind of formation? Are these bones also the remains of ancient powerhouses? Xiaohua put away these bones and released his divine sense to explore nearby. Sure enough, there was another stone pillar a few hundred kilometers away, and there were also some bones on it. Xiao Hua was alarmed and decided not to look for the passage anymore. Instead, he began to search the entire area within the magma. In the end, Xiao Hua discovered that there were more than 10 such stone pillars. Most of them had white bones on them. These white bones were of different sizes, but no matter how big they were, if they didn't have the killing power of lightning, then they had the power to penetrate through. Xiao Hua put away these bones and began to be vigilant. His divine sense swept into the depths of the magma. However, Xiao Hua's divine sense penetrated thousands of kilometers into the magma, and the powerful fluctuations in the magma blocked his divine sense. Xiao Hua didn't find anything strange. Those stone pillars didn't seem to be anything special. They were just hard rocks protruding from the magma. Forget it. Xiao Hua received his divine sense and flew into the passage. He thought to himself, there are many unknown dangers in the ancient world. I'm only at the Mahayana realm, and I'm afraid I'm not as strong as those ancient powerhouses. These dangers, it's better not to touch them. I'm just a passerby on this continent. Xiao Hua flew into the passage and flew upwards for several kilometers. Suddenly, a familiar divine sense swept over from above the passage. As soon as it touched Xiao Hua, it immediately stopped. An incredulous voice sounded in Xiao Hua's ears, "Master, why are you here?" Although Zhang Hong took Xiao Hua as her master, she often called him master. As for the green-robed Xiao Hua, she called him martial uncle. Hee. Hearing Zhang Hong's voice, Xiao Hua smiled and transmitted, "Just as I expected, these stone giants were born of the same bloodline. Although they were born of the same root, they worship different things. I followed these stone giants here, and as soon as I revealed my dragon body, they immediately regarded me as a god. They insisted on inviting me here." Thinking of what Master had done there, this disciple decided to go with the flow. "I was still thinking about how to inform Master, but Master followed me here. Could it be that the passage below is connected to the lava lake?" Zhang Hong transmitted a few words to Xiao Hua in a low voice. Xiao Hua nodded slightly. His figure transformed into the appearance of Dragon Vein Xiao Hua and rushed out of the tunnel from a cave. Similar to the lava lake of the stone giants, Zhang Hong's lava lake was also like a large bowl. At this time, several stone giants were crawling in front of Zhang Hong, respectfully saluting her. The pious look on his face was very similar to that of the old stone giant. Behind these stone giants, the thousands of stone giants that had been fighting earlier were now in a neat formation. They lowered their heads, not daring to look directly at Zhang Hong. Behind Zhang Hong, there was also a similar Buddhist shrine with a mighty dragon coiled within. "Master, what should we do now?" Seeing Xiao Hua fly out and land in front of her, Zhang Hong hurriedly bowed and asked, Dragon God, Dragon God." The stone giants who were originally kneeling heard the movement and hurriedly raised their heads. Seeing the dragon-formed Zhang Hong saluting Xiao Hua, they were greatly shocked. Xiao Hua's dragon form seemed to be more imposing than Zhang Hong, and even the halo above the dragon horn made them feel a sense of worship. They couldn't help but crawl on the ground and cry out. Xiao Hua had already subdued a group of stone giants, so he naturally understood the situation of this group of stone giants. He nodded slightly and let out a cold snort. With a wave of his hand, fire attribute primordial stones fell into the lava like raindrops. Then, Xiao Hua's dignified voice sounded, "This is the food this sovereign bestowed to you. From now on, you don't need to invade other people." Speaking till here, Xiao Hua couldn't continue. Clearly, these stone giants weren't enlightened and didn't understand what he was talking about. Moreover, these stone giants only had primordial stones in their eyes, so how could they care about what Xiao Hua was talking about? Xiao Hua looked at the several stone giants kneeling in front of him. Then, he raised his hand and pointed his flower-like finger at the forehead of these stone giants, just like Buddha Bodhi did before. Soon after, Xiao Hua also sent these stone giants into the space and opened them with a Tao secret technique. After sending these stone giants out of the space, Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and looked at the Buddhist shrine. The dragon god statue inside was different from the Buddha statue of Nanwu Maitreya. There weren't any changes. Thus, Xiaohua's heart became gloomy. Master, seeing the tens of thousands of stone giants lined up in the lava, just like before, Zhang Hong said in a low voice, "Senior brothers are all over there. If this disciple teaches these stone giants alone, I'm afraid I won't be able to take care of them. These stone giants who believe in the dragon god are different from the stone giants who believe in Buddhism. Their temperament is somewhat irritable. If they obtain a divine ability, they might invade other stone giants. At that time, Master would have to work hard for nothing, and that would be terrible." Master understands, Xiaohua said as he took out the Kunlun mirror. "First, send out the Lu family's disciples from the Kunlun immortal realm to assist you. Then, Master will go back and discuss with your martial uncles. There must be other stone giants in the lava, so we might as well enlighten them." "Okay." Zhang Hong naturally didn't have any objections, replying, "Disciple will listen to Master's instructions." Xiaohua sent out 100 Lu family's disciples, then returned to the lava lake. He told Buddha Bodhi, Confucian cultivator Xiaohua, and the others his plan, and they all agreed. Then, under Confucian cultivator Xiaohua's suggestion, Xiaohua went to the edge of the lava lake, took out the Kunlun mirror, and sent out the tens of thousands of elite soldiers who had been fighting in the Kunlun immortal realm. These Fortune Gates disciples had gone through many battles, so they had long learned to obey orders. They obeyed Xiaohua's orders as if they were military orders, and there was no need for Xiaohua to explain too much. After Xiaohua finished speaking, these disciples began to plan and discuss countermeasures. In the time it took to eat half a meal, everyone had come up with a complete plan. These plans were passed to Lu Yi and the other disciples, and then to Xiaohua. When Xiaohua saw these plans, he couldn't help but be moved. What Xiaohua thought of, these disciples gave practical steps. What Xiaohua didn't think of, these disciples gave suggestions based on their own understanding. There were even many things that Xiaohua didn't consider. First of all, Xiaohua only wanted these disciples to teach the stone giants in the lava lake. These disciples felt that teaching the stone giants would hinder the heavens' justice. Moreover, if the stone giants were in trouble, other races would also be in trouble. Therefore, they suggested not only teaching the stone giants, but also the golden-armored little man and other desolate races. Secondly, Xiaohua only wanted to teach the stone giants, but these disciples felt that since the desolate land was so big, there was no harm in expanding the scope of teaching. After all, this was not a war, and some disciples with lower cultivation could also contribute. Therefore, they suggested that Xiaohua let out all the Shenhua continent's disciples that could, as a kind of travel and a kind of test. Finally, they also suggested that Xiaohua and the other Grand Ascension Realm cultivators should stay in the center and immediately teleport over to defend against any desolate beasts. Especially Xiaohua, because he controlled the Kunlun mirror. All the desolate races that were taught had to enter the Kunlun immortal realm to be enlightened. Therefore, Xiaohua had to establish a communication channel with these disciples, and when Xiaohua was needed, Xiaohua should be there in a timely manner. Ha ha ha. Xiaohua looked at these suggestions and plans and beamed with joy. He clapped his hands and said, "With such disciples in my fortune gate, why should I worry about the Tao gate? Fuck. If the immortal emperor says half a word more, this daddy will lead the fortune gate to break through the immortal palace." Then, Xiaohua's eyes turned, and the Kunlun mirror in his hand trembled. Tens of thousands of fragments fell into the hands of these disciples, and he said, "You all hold on to this item. Whenever you need this, old man, use my fortune gates cultivation technique, and this old man will immediately descend. Also, you all have a mission. When you search the desolate land, find a suitable place for my human race to live, and report to this old man in detail." Yes, this disciple understands. Over 10,000 disciples answered in a low voice, and their voices were quite loud. Subsequently, Xiaohua activated the Kunlun mirror. As a bright light flickered, a steady stream of Fortune Gate disciples flew out from the so-called Kunlun paradise. According to the previous agreement, Lu Yi, Yuanya, Yu Zhongquan, and other disciples led the way, flying off in different directions. Fellow immortal. Watching groups of disciples leaving, soul cultivator Xiaohua rubbed his nose and said with a wry smile, "No matter how I look at it, I feel that you're going to occupy the entire continent, I have no reason to occupy this continent, Xiao Hua pursed his lips and replied, I just feel that educating the desolate lands races is a kind of merit, and it's quite troublesome for me to do it myself. That's why I'm distributing the merit to my disciples. Then why are you looking for a suitable place for the human race to live? Scholar Xiao Hua was puzzled and asked again, Fellow immortal, have you forgotten the incense cult's mission? Xiao Hua smiled and said, Don't tell me I'm going to bring the incense cult's primordial spirit cultivating disciples to the hidden immortal mainland? Are you going to treat them as Confucian cultivators? Or Tao Gate? Indeed, Scholar Xiao Hua said as if he had just woken up from a dream. Although this continent is mysterious and desolate land, it's still a higher realm, and is very suitable for the incense cult's disciples. The incense cult's ancestors are really amazing. They can actually divine that will come here. The Tao Gate's divination techniques are naturally amazing. Xiao Hua agreed. We've only touched the surface, and we're already vigilant about our own good or bad luck. In the future, when our cultivation deepens, we'll naturally know more. However, all divination techniques can only be used as a reference, and there might be a mistake. Isn't the little exquisite temple a good example? -13.